This is Sam with IT. We're ready to go live.
Thank you. It is 7 p.m. and time to call the August 1st meeting of the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission to order. Will staff please confirm the presence of a quorum?
Ms. Berkman?
Here.
Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljaric?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item is approval of our minutes of the July 18th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion regarding the minutes tonight?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 18th, 2022.
Thank you. Motion from Victor McCarty,
I'll second.
seconded by Dr. Kelleher. Staff, please call the roll.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Schmitz. I'm going to get you back on video. Can you turn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We're calling an audible and moving the item that is next on the agenda, the approval of amended rules of procedure, to the end, since it seems like there may be a bit of discussion. Anybody in the room is welcome to stick around to the end and listen to that discussion, but in case you're not, we're going to go ahead and wait till later to do that. So we'll go on, if staff would please review the rules and procedures for tonight's meeting that has the whole gamut of types of business in front of us.
Yes, for public hearing items this evening, the meeting shall have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing. Individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. Those representing a group will be given 5 minutes to speak. Only one member of the group will be given 5 minutes to speak, and for efficiency purposes, we ask that those representing a group speak first. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard and all emails received during the meeting have been provided to Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For our non-public hearing items, the department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the Plan Commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission can then act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time, and again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, then please form a line along the west wall when the hearing is open and sign in on this sign-in sheet as you approach the podium. Again, we ask those representing a group to please come up and speak first. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we ask that you not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there is approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and wish to comment on a petition, your comment should be emailed to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We'd also like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be put onto the record, and also please mute your microphone when not speaking. If you are in person and come up to the podium to speak, please ensure that the microphone is on as indicated by the green light on the base. Thank you.
Thank you. Next order of business is approval of our consent agenda, which tonight has a sole item on it. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda item as presented in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there
I can second.
Second. So we have a motion by Andre Maui, second by Kristen Berkman. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spillier.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to items of business. The first item of business is 2206-ODP-06 and 2206-SPP-06, spring water. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Plan Commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is an overall development plan and primary plat of 90 residential lots on approximately 15.5 acres in the Springwater PUD district. The project is generally located about 2,000 feet north of the intersection at 161st and Union, located between the Lantern Park subdivision and the Summit Lawn Cemetery. This item is eligible for approval consideration. Staff has received one public comment, which has been provided as an exhibit. Ed Hamilton of Apollo Developers is here tonight and plans to provide a brief presentation. He's available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ed Hamilton with Apollo Developers, 9465 Counselors Row, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46240. I was up here in front of you in zoning. We are joint venture partners with the Old Town Design Group and the Bushamps on this project. I don't have much of a presentation, just kind of want to let you know I'm here to answer questions. We didn't make one change since we were here for zoning. It was something that came up in the council, which is the playground and gazebo area was shifted further north. It's going to be actually a little bit even into the woods. We're going to kind of clear out some of the low growth and strategically place the playground equipment in the woods there to make it a little bit more isolated from Union Street. But if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you. Staff made mention of a public comment having been received, but there isn't a comment exhibit on the online agenda.
We can look into that right now.
Okay.
I believe there was a comment on at the last meeting when we had the public hearing. They had that on the agenda. It was regarding providing, maintaining natural areas within so many feet of Cool Creek.
Okay. Well, staff, go ahead.
We'll look to see if it was posted on the last agenda. It sounds like it may have been prior to the last meeting and just not made it to this agenda.
All right. While staff does that, we'll go ahead and open the floor for commissioner comments or questions for the petitioner or staff, should there be any. Do we have any questions for anybody or comments that anybody would like to make?
No, just glad you're moving the playground. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll loiter for just a moment while we figure out if there's new material that we need to consider or not.
Yes, there was a public comment exhibit on the June 6th agenda,
All right. So
which had
nothing-
one email.
Nothing different between back then and now.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we're good. This item is here for our approval, not a recommendation. So is there a motion to approve with the staff condition?
I will make a motion to approve, let me get my bifocals in the right place here, 2206-ODP-06 and 2206-SPP-06, with the following condition, that all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department, Hamilton County Surveyors, prior to the issue of an improvement location permit.
Thank you. Is there a second? We have a motion from Dr. Kelleher and a second from Kristen Berkman. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spillier?
Yes.
Ms. Bergman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item of business is 2207-PUD-15, Midtown at Westfield PUD Amendment 1. This is in front of us for a recommendation to City Council. If we can proceed with the staff report.
Good evening, Plan Commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is an amendment to the Midtown at Westfield PUD, which, as you may recall, proposes to modify the development standards for a 100,000 square foot health pavilion. This item had a public hearing at the July 5th Plan Commission meeting. Since that meeting, the PUD has been modified so the character exhibits and images specific to the building and signage proposed for the property must be built in substantial compliance, along with some minor language modifications regarding landscaping and parking. This item is eligible for recommendation this evening. Matt Skelton of Church Hiddle and Antrim is present this evening to give a brief presentation, after which he will be available for questions, as am I for staff, if you have any. Thank you.
Mr. Skelton.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. Matt Skelton, Church Hiddle and Antrim, with offices at 116 North Union Street here in town. With me this evening is Tony Alderson and Chris Hoffey with the Alderson Development Group, and also Brian Cross, our civil engineer with Civil Site, is joined us this evening. I'll just quickly highlight the changes that have been made since we were just last here on the 5th of July. And if there's any other follow-up questions, feel free. One change that you'll notice, and you might want to go the red line. In the PUD ordinance, the staff asked us, as they had an opportunity to go through the PUD in a little bit more detail, had asked us to clarify, and it was the intention all along the way the PUD was crafted, but this avoids any potential confusion about the extent to which the 32 overlay zone applies here. It has been supplanted with the elevations that are before you. At your last meeting, we were asked if we could to incorporate substantial compliance language in the ordinance, and that's what this section does. So that has been done. There was some request for additional details regarding the architectural metal panels, and I provided an exhibit. That's the exhibit that was up to the staff, and this just shows it in application. And there's a zoomed out picture of a building as well. The difference in our case, and I realize you probably won't be regulating this, but the color here, I don't know if that does it justice, but we will be using a more copper tinted application. And that's a building that contains those materials. I hope that helps. We have also, as the staff raised last time and we discussed last time, addressed the building height issue on lot number 1. A portion of that building will be 3 stories so as to create more of a stair step kind of appearance, and that has been addressed in the ordinance. The landscaping standards have been modified through our detailed development plan process. It became aware that there are going to be several covered areas with canopies that will be very difficult for living things to survive under it. So we are asking for permission not to plant plantings under canopies, and in areas where pedestrian spaces are up against the building. We will be using planters and such to decorate just like any professional office would. Part of our parking area design standards, we've requested to eliminate the planting requirement along the south property line of Lot 1, specifically perimeter parking lot landscaping. That will be part of a shared parking field with Lot 2, and we would prefer not to rip out curbing and landscaping in order to accomplish that. Lighting standards, we were asked to incorporate a provision that would reduce the opportunity for light spillage up, and that language has been incorporated into the PUD. We will be using full cover fixtures that will protect against projecting vertically any kind of light spillage. The parking standards have been modified. There was a request last meeting to consider eliminating the reduction in parking lot size for compact cars. And parking's not going to be a problem for us, so it was easier just to eliminate the text. And then signage, there was a request that we consider incorporating language so there's no confusion that the city is not attempting to regulate content of signs. The ordinance specifically addresses locations and sizes. There was also discussion about an architectural logo that is conceptually planned for Building 2, where a logo is incorporated into the exterior building materials, and we have provided an amendment to the PUD that would make it so that anything built into the actual building materials would not be considered signage, even though technically under the UDO it might. And then lastly, we were asked to perform some level of analysis as to what the signage that is being proposed on this in this project compares to what would otherwise be permitted in the UDO. And I mentioned it at the last meeting. The UDO standards really do not translate well to this use, to this type of building, and specifically to this site. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. Under the UDO, the multi-story signage standards that are on the books today were designed for retail buildings. Essentially, they're like Thompson Thrift building down in front of LA Fitness on 146th Street. They were modeled to permit that exact use in that type of building. This is not a retail building. We do not qualify under the terms of the city's Unified Development Ordinance as a retail establishment. We don't have separate entrances for retail tenants. Additionally, we don't qualify under the terms of the city's ordinance as a individual non-residential user either. This building will be occupied by many practice groups, different business entities, and for that reason, it's hard to know what standard even applies here. So we put forth our charge to our architect was design signage that adequately provides exposure and complements the building and frankly looks good. And so that was the exercise. And so it was more of an artistic exercise and less of a technical one. If you asked if you applied the most restrictive wall signage standards in the UDO, which I'm guessing absent any guidance, that's probably where people would gravitate, this entire building would be entitled to like 277 square feet of signage, which means you'd be squinting to see it on every side. So what you have here before you is our proposal, and if there's detailed questions, I'll stop talking about it, and if there's more questions about it, we can talk at more length. I think the only other two items that I would address, and these are just questions that were asked that I didn't have answers to when I was at the microphone. So somebody asked if there would be ambulances visiting the property, and unless they're taking away a sick person that has become ill or something, there shouldn't be. This does not. We won't be receiving patients from ambulances. It's not a emergency care facility, and there will not be a helipad. So with that, happy to respond to any questions that you may have. We would very much like to move forward with the process, so we're not holding up the other approvals that you've already considered one of them, and we would look forward to your positive recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for the petitioner or staff from any of the APC members or comments? We have a volunteer to start.
Matt, you talked about fully covered light fixtures, and the gentleman there, we talked last time and he understood all that. Is fully covered an appropriate term for staff to understand? We usually use fully shielded.
They're full cover. So if you look at the fixture that's before you, I mean, that's the fixture we will use, and it shows a full cover on it.
Right, on top.
Uh-huh.
But is the light in top, is it an LED that shines from the top? Or is it a bulb that, like in a lamp?
That's my understanding that it is. The
It's
LED is
a
up.
LEDs in the top that okay, yeah, because I can't see inside of it, so it's not a bulb like on a light, a lamp, it's an,
So I can
Okay.
come forward.
For the record,
That's
the
fully
LEDs are up inside the.
yeah, that's fully shielded then. I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
staff knew what fully covered meant, because you could have a lamp with a bulb and you could cover it on top, and that would be fully covered, which is not what they're proposing. Thank you.
And that is, we've worked with the Hinkie team, and so that's the same
Right.
fixture they're gonna use throughout the development.
Right, and I figure that. That wasn't my question so much as, does staff understand what fully covered means versus really what you're doing is fully shielded? And I wanted to make sure that we were just all clear on the meaning so that later on, there wasn't an issue.
Well, you showed two different kinds of lighting, and it's that other one that I'm actually concerned about.
Oh,
That
these?
one. Yes.
Yeah, those are all entire, I mean, there's no portion of a light that extends below the light.
Those are considered fully shielded?
Fully shielded,
These are, yes.
yep.
Okay.
And he said that the street light, the decorative one, was also fully shielded.
Yeah, the ones that you're looking at on this page 2 actually provide the most control of any kind of commercial fixture that you can. It's the same ones the city uses. I don't know if it's the same brand, but it's the same style. They keep the light in the parking lot and not in the park.
More and more fixtures today are including photo or motion sensors such that they dim when there's no traffic or occupants, but brighten only as needed. Would this perhaps be something like that? Do we know?
It probably has that capacity.
As what?
It probably has that capacity.
It's more curiosity
Yeah,
than
we've
looking for
submit-
an agreement necessarily.
We submitted photometric diagrams with our detailed development plan, and those are not a problem to
Right,
comply.
I understand what
Yeah.
they would be able to achieve as far as a cutoff, but it's further enhanced if there's ability to dim when there's no activity that needs to be protected, so to speak. So, other questions or comments from fellow commissioners here? Do you have
I
more?
think several of us do.
Okay,
Oh, I didn't have a question, but just a comment. I'd say we all know it's impossible for us to anticipate the exact design that's best for a site, but where we succeed, the ordinances have established the bar for the minimum quality, and I believe we did that here, and then we further succeed when we adapt that when there's a design that meets that bar, isn't trying to skirt that minimum quality, but actually is applying it in a way that makes the most sense, and I think that's this amendment. I think this is a good application of the materials and the slight changes that are necessary to make this work on the site, so I think it's good.
Thank you.
Kristen?
I just wanted to thank you for making the parking spots the normal size. I think that's a good move. As I've been in a lot of parking lots since I made that comment at the last meeting, and I think I appreciate that. The other question is maybe for staff, because you did mention the helipad. Is that something that is in the original ordinance? I'm sorry, I didn't look back on that. Just with this being a medical facility, is that something that would need to come back for approval if the tenant in the future wanted to do that? I understand what they're saying right now, that they're not.
In the UDO, I believe helipads are usually a special exception, so unless the PUD specifically permitted them, they would need to come back. We're trying to open that right now to look at it. It's not opening for me. Okay.
And I think you've already seen the plans for the facility, so there's no plan for that. So if there were a change, we'd have to go through some kind of approval process for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a few.
Sure.
So, kind of still having trouble with the signage issue, because again, we don't really understand the exact amount of signage that you've got here. I mean, you show it on the building, and so we understand that. But in terms of being equitable to others in this site, around this site, that does concern me. Still does. The corporate logo not counting as signage, that to me also too kind of sets a precedent that I don't know that that's what we're hoping to see reproduced. And I get that this is a more of an institutional kind of use and a special kind of thing. Allowing it once, it won't be the last time that we'll be seeing that. So that kind of opens a door that I don't know I like. But again, you're not even including your actual sign size.
Yeah, they're in the
So-
ordinance. The sign sizes are in the exhibit of the ordinance.
The exact size?
Yes,
Is
calculated
that
the
the
way.
two?
Yeah, calculated the way Westfield calculates it, and
Okay, I
that's-
did not see that.
Yeah, and that's much larger. There are lots of voids. The way the UDO defines signage area, it requires you to draw a square around the entire area of the signs. And just if you look at this, I mean, there's probably 35% of that area that is not signed. And so it just, rather than even go down that road, we just try to, I mean, there really I can't imagine, I can't come up with a comp in Westfield because I would have researched it.
And here's where I do get concerned, though, especially this will be lit signage, correct?
Correct.
There are neighbors in the area, and they are going to be impacted by the light from this project. And so having lit signage on upper stories is definitely going to be impactful to the surroundings.
And so the signage in your ordinance in Article 6.9 of the city's UDO has all the photometric requirements for, it's not just lighting, it's lighting, period, and it doesn't matter if it comes from a sign or whether it comes from a fixture, you still have to comply. And so if there's any signage that emanates from this site that is not in compliance with those standards, which are restrictive standards, it's 0.5 foot candles at the property line, then you can't do it. You'd either have to come and try to amend an ordinance. We even comply with those standards with our streetlights. That's how effective the lighting is. And if it makes you feel any better, your neighbor, the only existing neighbors that will be near this are I think the property line is 750 feet away. And I think the nearest home is probably 850 feet away, or give or take. And so that's like
Within the
almost 3
project, though, there is a residential component to this project, too.
Absolutely, but they're going to be living in a Williamsburg dense urban development, and there will be lots of signage throughout it, I'm sure. It won't just be from here.
I get it, it's just, it does concern me, and it always concerns me about especially lit signage when we have neighbors.
I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Matt, is it going to be internally?
You just turned.
Yes.
I just turned it off. Sorry, I just turned it off, and then I tried to talk to you. It's going to be internally lit?
That's the plan, yes.
Okay. And I think what Cindy's getting at, and we had I think it was a kinder care on Ditch Road that faced some residential on the other side, on the east side of Ditch. Kinder care was on the west side, but it faced, its signage faced east into the backyards of those homes. And while the sign probably didn't meet the foot candle, to be intrusive, it was intrusive because it was very big and very bright, and when these people looked out their back windows, it was kind of right in their face. So I don't know if there are ways to soften that against the side that's residential. Mainly what you want your sign to show is towards 31, obviously. I don't know if there are any other thoughts on that. It's just something to throw out there.
Well, and I'd offer to you, I mean, this signage is, it's not really against residential. If it is against residential, it's going to be high-density multifamily.
That's what I wondered.
residential.
This doesn't face to the north then?
No, there is a sign that faces to the north, but like I said, the property line is nearly it's about 750 feet away, and there's a dense tree line between.
Yeah.
Today, there's a couple, but one is going to be modified a little bit with some of the flood management, I think. But I mean, it's probably about I don't know if I could dream up a better location for this use.
And I don't see the same amount of concern that I did for the kinder care, because one, the spacing that Matt mentioned, but also two, the buffering, and then to the neighbors to the north, and then neighbors to the west, I mean, that's 31, and then Spring Hill Suites. So I don't see that level of concern as something as close-knit as something like kinder care.
And I think the Spring Mill Suites is visible to our neighbors to the north, because obviously there's nothing really between it and 31. That's just not the case with this site.
Anything else, Cindy?
No, just your parking was 9 foot by 18 feet, correct? That's what we just approved on the plan?
I don't, we're not modifying the,
That's our standard.
yeah.
Okay. It just, I know we didn't speak to that necessarily, but that's what it was showing on your,
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
we're not,
details about it.
we're not proposing to modify anything that, any of the underlying standards.
okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Hearing none, this is here for a recommendation to council. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for 2207-PUD-15 Midtown at Westfield PUD Amendment 1 to send a positive recommendation on to council.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion by Victor McCarty, a second by Matt Deck. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spiljerik?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Moving on now, we have two public hearing items. And I will put out the reminder again as we start. If there are any comments coming from anybody that is attending virtually, please, if you haven't already started typing, do so and get an email to planners@westfield.in.gov and put the petition number in the subject. First public hearing is 2208-PUD-16, Westfield Yard, PUD.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. For the record, I am Lauren Gillingham, the Community Development Department. Am I being picked up right? Okay. So the item before you this evening is a proposal to rezone about 10.8 acres west of Gray Road and 200 feet south of State Road 32 from AG SF1 Agricultural Single Family Rural to Westfield Yard PUD to permit a maximum of 75 townhome dwellings on the site. This item was introduced at the July 11th City Council meeting, and a neighbor meeting was held on July 25th. A summary of that meeting is included in Exhibit 9. This item is scheduled for a public hearing this evening. It has been legally noticed and advertised, and staff has received one public comment, which was forwarded to you earlier today. John Dabashewitz of Nelson and Frankenberger is present this evening to give a brief presentation and answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dabashewitz.
Thank you.
See if that mouse works. We have two now. It's very convenient.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Plan Commission members. For the record, John Dabashewitz, land use professional with the law firm Nelson and Frankenberger. We represent the petitioner Grand Communities. Present tonight on behalf of Grand Communities is Nate Alexander, land acquisition manager for Fisher Homes and other members of our development team. As indicated by staff, the matter before you this evening is the public hearing for the PUD ordinance that is being requested in order to develop a townhome neighborhood. Grant Communities is the development arm for Fisher Homes. By way of general background, the commission may be aware that Fisher builds today single-family homes in Westfield, at Derby Ridge, and Chatham Hills. The subject real estate is highlighted on the aerial on display. The property, to expand on what staff offered, is approximately 11 acres in area and is bound generally by State Road 32 to the north, although we don't have frontage here. There are other parcels intervening in between. Gray Road along our east perimeter. Along the south perimeter of the real estate is the Midland Trace Trail, and another approximately 10-acre parcel that exists with frontage on State Road 32 that's between the subject site and the Bonterra townhome development to our west. The subject property is an infill site where residential use between the Crestview neighborhood on the south side of the Midland Trace Trail to our south and commercial along State Road 32 provides a reasonable land use transition. The concept plan for the site is on display now. As one can see, there is a gas pipeline easement which crosses the property from southwest to northeast. This easement is just over 100 feet wide. That's identified here on the concept plan. Vehicular access for the property will be from Gray Road at 2 locations via public street. So there will be a public street here that crosses through the site with a stub street to the west, and then there'll be a public street that tees in here with, again, access back to Gray Road. The primary view from Gray Road with folks traveling along Gray Road would be of the pond and landscaping with predominantly the fronts of homes which face Gray Road. There's the front of homes would face here. There'd be the front of homes that face Gray Road here and a side view here, as well as a side that faced Gray Road. The community will consist of 75 townhomes consisting of a mix of front entry and rear or alley-loaded townhomes. All the homes will be on dedicated fee simple lots, which will be sold to individual home buyers. The alley-load townhomes will be served via private alleys in 3 locations. So the darker of the shaded areas, those are the dwellings, the townhomes, which will be served via alley. So this pod, if you will, here, the front of the dwelling faces to the west, faces along the street frontage, and faces Gray Road with alley access here. There's an alley position here, and the fronts of these dwellings would face towards the common area. Likewise, in this pocket, the front of these homes face generally towards Gray Road, so you're traveling in, seeing the front of those. These dwellings, the front of the house would face the street, and the garage or alley would be behind. The area that has the shaded, lighter shaded homes along the north, west, and south perimeter, those homes would have the front door and the garage on the same side. So we've got a situation here where all the garage doors are facing interior and not away from or toward adjoining properties, whether that be Gray Road or the intervening properties along State Road 32. Pedestrian paths and connections are made to the Midlands Trace Trail at 2 locations. One of those locations would be the extension of actually it's a sidewalk today that exists here in Crestview, but we'd pick that up and make it an asphalt path, extend it north to our northern perimeter. And then there's another proposed connection here to the Midland Trace Trail, so we can create some loops and encourage activity and use of those trails throughout our site as illustrated. Additionally, there is a significant tree line which exists along the north side of the Midland Trail. So all along our perimeter here, except as you get to the pipeline easement, which it isn't as heavy where it's cleared. So there's a significant tree line along that south portion, which will be preserved as part of the site development with one exception, and that exception would be the necessary clearing that would take place to attach that trail segment. So right here in this location where the trail connection is, we'd have to clear a modest amount in that location to connect onto the Midland. Finally, common area spaces are planned to include a seating area overlooking the pond and fountain, as well as a dog park and pedestrian trails, all of which would be maintained by the HOA. Regarding the townhome architecture, as noted, there will be a mix of front entry and rear alley entry townhomes. The type and style of architecture is specified in the exhibits to the PUD. So ultimately, what is approved as part of the PUD for elevations, substantial compliance will be required of those home elevations. The Westfield yard includes specific architectural standards and requirements for all homes. Vinyl siding is prohibited, and all townhomes will include a combination of multiple materials, including masonry. I don't have side elevations and rear elevations to show you tonight, but they are, well, I do if you want to pull up the ordinance, that they're all included in the ordinance. We just didn't make it part of our presentation materials. This next exhibit, let me go through the top one real quickly so we're all on the same page. What's referred to as a front entry townhome is where the dwelling has the front driveway and the garage door with the adjacent entrance to the home along its side. What's referred to as an alley or rear load townhome is the ones that are shown here in this exhibit, where the front door is on the opposite side of the alley where the garage is. And I described earlier where both of these home types are positioned throughout the site. And then we just have one additional exhibit. This is the front load where the garage and the front door are on the same side. This on the front end here, right here, is illustrated of an alley-fed townhome with the front windows and door facing the street. Again, an image here of the front load product. The alley load townhomes that we just looked at would be approximately 2,100 square feet, and the front load homes will be approximately 2,400 square feet. Additionally, anticipated home values will be between $450,000 and $500,000. Again, depending on which unit type those are and the square footage. As noted, the builder is Fisher Homes, and Fisher has a vision to create a neighborhood of high-end townhomes which will serve as a transition between the single-family neighborhood to the south, Crestview, and the Midland to existing future commercial uses along State Road 32. In conclusion, Fisher anticipates buyers who are seeking high-quality housing options, including low-maintenance living in close proximity to the mill and trail, what I didn't mention, and this is pretty indicative of most of the townhome developments. Everything on the exterior of the home, including snow removal and landscape maintenance, is the responsibility of the HOA, not the individual buyer. There's a provision in the ordinance that says that. Typically, staff asks us to remove it, so you may see it removed at the end because, as we've discussed with staff, they don't want a provision in there that someone would infer that the city is responsible for legislating. Rather, it's the responsibility of the HOA, and that's fine. We just always like to include it as an informative item. Somebody might ask, well, why don't you have that? And that would be the reason for a future question. We appreciate your time this evening. After tonight's meeting, we'll take into consideration the comments we received from the council at the introduction, as well as the Plan Commission tonight, and of course, staff and the public, and would anticipate returning back to the Plan Commission at a future meeting for an update on what items were addressed prior to, of course, coming back to you at a future meeting after that for a potential recommendation onto the council for consideration. With that, I'll conclude. Appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to the public hearing. Once again, a reminder for anybody attending virtually, please email planners@westfield.in.gov if you have comments that you would like to share. Do we have anybody signed up to speak on this? Oh. Public hearing is opened at 7:44.
Okay, we don't have anyone signed up at this time, but if anyone would like to speak, please come up, sign in on the clipboard, and state your comments.
Going once, going twice. No takers, apparently. And you have not seen any emails probably either.
No emails that have come in during the meeting.
Right. I've heard a couple of reminders. There is the one prior correspondence, but during the course of the meeting to be a part of the public hearing, we have not received any. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:44 and open the floor to commissioner questions or comments for the petitioner or staff.
Can I start off with one very general one?
Please.
In our comprehensive plan, we have this as local commercial. And I realize that we approved townhomes to the west of this, but that also had a commercial component. You don't have 32 frontage, but it also leaves this very awkward, very small parcel on the corner that's perhaps undevelopable, from what I understand, given its size and other problems. And I'm wondering if you've tried to get that corner with this project, or just did not seek it, or?
We can find out from the applicant if they, I don't believe they approached the owner. Today, I believe that parcel it may be zoned commercially. I know it's being marketed commercially. I wasn't aware that it was undevelopable. It sits next to adjacent parcels of similar size, and I believe it meets the ordinance standards for commercial development.
It's just really tight, and with the right-of-way that 32 is going to need everything else. So the other complicating factor, and not that it's directly impacting this site, will be the Duke substation going into the east.
So for everyone's benefit, if I can, this property that I'm outlining on the screen is owned by Duke Energy, and their proposal is to construct a substation on that site. If you followed along, as I have, as I live in the area, there's multiple different options that Duke is proposing for lines that would tie into that, options that exist along State Road 32 that would run along the Midland or behind these businesses here, or south along Gray Road down to 171st Street. So those are all things that we're taking into consideration.
Okay.
They don't have frontage though along Gray Road, which is an advantage. This would be the drive access onto the site in this vicinity, where I believe that home is no longer there. I'll stand corrected, but I can't recall. I do recall driving by the other day, and I think that may have already been removed.
It's not there on Google Maps.
Okay.
Or the county GIS.
This may not pick it up as an older piece, but I probably an older area. But it's my understanding that most of their improvements are in this vicinity here, which would be screened by the visibility would be obscured by the homes that exist along Gray Road today.
And they have talked about the Midland corridor being the location for those new transmission lines.
They have.
Yeah.
As one of several different options.
Correct.
It's our desire for them not to implement that.
Obviously.
As I think it is the rest of the community, because it would, if it runs along the Midland, the whole canopy of trees that's along that frontage would be destroyed from my understanding. I'm not the authority, but all behind Kroger and through that space, it creates a pretty significant barrier and buffer for the community between those commercial uses and the residential to the south. We don't have any control over that approval process, but I know the city and different neighborhoods have been communicating with Duke about the options.
Right. And it would impact this project if it did happen, and especially because you're saying that you're going to have a tree preservation area and the buffer yard there, the 20 feet. So obviously it would be impacted, since they want 75 to 100 feet for their easement, and they want stuff out of it. So that does concern me. I know it's not yet there, but it's a possibility.
Well, let's do this. Let's see if we can make adjustments to the ordinance that would mitigate that circumstance if that was ultimately the corridor, which we hope it isn't. We'll write into the ordinance that we would have to still meet the buffer requirement between single family attached and the single family to the south, so we'd have to add additional landscaping. That may cause an adjustment to the plan, which scoots things around, but if it, in any event, we'll take a look at that.
And just some of the bigger ticket items, I know that when we had met before on this, and just to let everyone know, I did meet with John about this project, and I did have concerns about some of the architecture, and also requesting that there be two-story abutting the Midland Trail, like we did over at 161st and Spring Mill when we had the apartments go in, and as a buffer there, so you didn't have more of a wall effect going into people's backyards. We did ask them to have a two-story instead of a three-story against the Midland. Against their piece of trail they had over there or whatever. So I think that would be a good thing to consider for this project too. for the Crestview neighbors, given that it's especially a bit wall-like there, depending on how this works out with the treed buffer. In the treed buffer too, you have a 20-foot buffer yard, which is in a type A, but then you have the 10 feet preservation area. And I'm assuming that's aggregate and that's not separate? I'm trying to figure out how that works.
Well, there's a minimum 20-foot buffer, and our agreement would be to preserve trees within the 10 feet at the south property line. And it's because that's where the trees are located. If you get out there, you can't, it's really hard to discern, but the property line that actually exists isn't the fence line. The property line that exists that is not owned by the owner is a little bit further to the north, so the additional 10 feet gets us all the trees that are there. The 20 feet is that we stay far enough away that we're not in the drip line of any of the existing trees. One of the things that I did, Ms. Blajaric had mentioned, and we got this feedback from a couple other council members as well, some of these slope roof elements, which I'll butcher and call them modern. That's not an architectural term, but we had been asked to concentrate or perhaps modify some of that so there's more of the gable or pitched roofs here rather than the sloped roofs that are shown here. Again, that's, I think, just a preference that was expressed to us, and Fisher's taken that into consideration and may modify the roof line to be more consistent in the so that there's the pitched roofs rather than the sloped.
Just to jump in on that real quick, if I may, I like that modern look because I think it's something unique to Westfield that I haven't really seen. So that's just my 2 cents. But again, as you mentioned, it's just a personal preference, but I like it.
The other comment that was mentioned, and I would like to get the feedback of the rest of the commission so we have a good gauge about the thoughts about transitioning from 3-story to a lower height dwelling type before we get to the Midland. And if you look at this image, and if you've been across that segment of trail, most of the rear yards in Crestview have either a privacy fence or a chain link fence in them, and you can see that here. And there's approximately 80 to 90 feet between those fences and the closest dwelling on the other side of the tree line here, and then another, I'll say 40 feet approximately between the fences, and generally those homes, they're a combination of ranches and 2-story dwellings. It's not our anticipation that it would be necessarily a privacy issue with the tree line that's there and these 3-story townhomes, but wanted to get the feedback of the rest of the commission so we could clearly have an understanding. Today, Fisher doesn't build a 2-story townhome. In the event that there was a lot of concern about the 2-story height, it may be that Fisher would consider a row of single-family homes along this south perimeter here, single-family detached homes, which would be introducing a second product into the site, which is not what they would prefer, but we wanted to get, again, some discussion going with the Plan Commission about that.
I'm going to jump in here, John. I apologize. First of all, I have not had a chance to review this in detail. I was out of town and had a busy weekend. We got 2 new puppies, and so I haven't done my due diligence on this. I will and get my comments to you by Wednesday at the latest, to you and staff. But from what I'm hearing, the picture of the homes, of the fronts of homes, is kind of interesting to me. I kind of look like it ought to be in Harry Potter or something. So I don't have as big an issue with that as maybe some people do. My concern is that southern property line, and it sounds like you're trying to do the right thing by preserving the trees. It sounds like there could be an issue with Duke Energy. I don't know at what point we'll know about that, but it certainly, since it's forthcoming and we know it's coming, I think it's worthwhile for you and your client to look at an alternative, as you have said, if that wipes out all of those trees and destroys that area. And I'll throw the 2-story into that same alternative based on what might happen with that buffer if it goes away.
Okay.
That's what I got right now.
Thank you. I have the same opinion. It really comes down to if that buffer's still there. I guess my concern is the privacy, not so much like the the sunlight view as if this would be east or west side. You know, since it's along the north side of the neighbors, it all comes down to that privacy looking down in there, and you have to have a backup plan if that gets wiped out. I think that's the critical piece too. On the elevations, you were asking for input. I don't prefer the modern look. I like the gabled style, but that's just me personally. We've talked so many times about being eclectic and not having a single style here. So from an ordinance perspective, I favor letting you mix it up and have the shed roof, the single slope roof, and the gable, and I don't have an issue with that.
I'll just chime in by agreeing with my fellow commissioners that, you know, just having a backup plan would be positive if Duke so chooses that unfortunate route along the Midland, because I think that would be a negative impact on our community. But nonetheless, to just be prepared for that, having a two-story option, even though not preferred, would be preferable at least up here to avoid the privacy issues.
Yeah, and again, our effort is to build, I lost the word when I stopped, I apologize, but we want to build consensus on the roof design issue and go back to the folks who had that concern and say, here was the temperature of the Plan Commission. Is this a big enough concern of yours that you would want to have it one way or the other? And then come back to you with what that met that expectation. Everyone realizes ultimately we have to go back to the council. And it was mentioned, so we brought it up and we're discussing it. And if it is a strong enough issue, we'll see a modification. And if it's not, we would prefer, or Fisher would prefer to have it as it's proposed today, but we appreciate that. And I'm going to go back to Duke and see if we can contact them and see if we can get a better read on their timeline. So when we do return back to the Plan Commission, we can hopefully have a better gauge on when they're going to make that decision.
Yeah. Just chime in one last time on the roofing. Due to the amount of townhomes that we have in our community, and given their history and their age, I would like to see townhomes that just have a little bit more youthful look to them, and I think that's what those present. So that's just, again, my 2 cents on that. And then I just do have kind of one aside. Due to the success of the Fisher's Yard, I was a little disappointed that this is called Westfield Yard, and we don't have, you know, any restaurants and stuff that Fisher's does, but it's okay. It's fine.
One of the unique things here, and I pointed out in our presentation, was that these homes are 21 to 2,400 square feet in size, where there's other product in the community that ranges from like 1,200 square feet up to about 1,500. Bonterra, not that their dwellings are that small, but the ordinance called for 1,500 square feet, and that's what we wrote into this ordinance, 1,500 square feet. And then when we presented in front of the Plan Commission, or the council for introduction, kind of saw some raised eyebrows when we said 450 to 500,000. And you'll see the modification that comes back at your next meeting where it's 2,124 square foot as the minimum size. We just left well enough alone on the ordinance that was prepared for the other project. I don't think they have homes that small, but here, the 21 and 2,400 square foot really supports the values that we're talking about, $450,000 to $500,000 in terms of the townhome product.
John, I have two more concerns, and they are in with the definitions, and they're the dominant exterior material and the exterior material. I don't quite know why you've called these out. We have our own definitions for this, but it also calls out, it makes it look like it's for any elevation, but it's not. It's only the front elevation on both of those. I don't know why you would do that.
Those standards are in there for monotony mitigation, so that we have differences between those. And there's no shame in taking what was reviewed previously by the Commission and Planning and Council and copying that into this ordinance. Those terms as defined are from the Bonterra ordinance. Again, there's defined terms in the ordinance, but we're also going to the substantial compliance with the approved elevation. So I'll reach out to staff if they know more about that concern, and if it's unnecessary to include them because we're identifying substantial compliance, then we can take them out. But I think it spoke to the monotony mitigation across the front of the dwellings.
What I don't like about that, it is just on one side, one set of elevations. Then we don't have anything for the others. And I don't like when we approach it like that.
Other than ultimately the way the ordinance is written, the side and rear elevation, while we don't show all the various combinations, like there's some 3-unit buildings, there's 4-unit, 5-unit, 6-unit, and 8-unit buildings. The ordinance calls for substantial compliance with those elevations. So when you see it, and we'll have it written that there's a combination of materials and you'll see the elevations, there won't be a question about, there shouldn't be a question about what it looks like. We'll detail it out.
Okay. I would just prefer that you take these out, these two definitions.
We will strongly consider it, and if we do take them out, we'll make sure that those provisions that we had intended aren't lost, but they're carried over to the exhibits.
Thank you.
Just before we move on from the trees on the southern border, is there going to be a drainage and utility easement there? Is that something we also have to be concerned about, losing trees, or will that be along the road?
Yeah, the drainage and utility easement will be picked up north of the tree line, so there'll be, and it's, there's a bit of a mound, so if you're on the Midland today and you step off to the north, there's a couple feet, of course, the gravel edge, and then there's a mound. And when I say mound, it's probably 2 to 4 feet. It's not like 8 feet or anything like that.
Right.
But we'll pick up, and there'll be a drainage and utility easement that would exist beyond that, where we'll pick everything up on the north side of it and transmit it into the ponds.
So that won't get into the tree line at all?
Nope.
Okay,
Nope.
thank you.
John, how large are the patios on the rear elevations here?
8 by 15 typical size.
And is there any way you can do something to the rear elevation to make it pop a little bit more? It looks a little boring. I mean, it's not quite like a barracks with the windows and the doors, but is there anything you can do with color or railing or?
A couple things that we'll come back with. This was expressed to us at the council level at introduction. You'll see the side elevations that were submitted in the ordinance, and they include like first floor masonry on the side and 2-story masonry on the side, because it blended well with the front elevation if there was a 2-story. We might take a look at that and provide masonry on all 4 sides. So there's masonry on the rear elevation, as well as try to carry over a roof pitch element or a combination of materials on the back side, whether that's horizontal board and batten, along with the horizontal siding, something to differentiate between the units and so that it's not a wall without interruption.
Thank you. I think it'll go a long way toward really improving the product.
Thank you.
Dave Schmitz, we haven't heard from you in a while, and my bad for not actually interrupting to specifically prompt this. Do you have anything you would like to ask or comment on?
Just that I think I feel the way several other commissioners do as far as the south boundary. I think the due timing kind of impacts what I would want there. If the tree buffer remains, then I think I'm pretty comfortable with it as presented. But if not, then that changes everything along that south boundary. And I don't have a problem with the roof design. So that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, anything? You're good? Yes? No? You're good. You have some more, Kristen?
John, so we had a project along the Midland that Old Town is approved to do that's at Union Street, that's also townhomes. And I'm just wondering, can you take a look at that project and what the setback was from the Midland? I think I recall those were 3-story, but I could be mistaken on that. But it would be nice to have the two projects compared as far as what the landscaping is for the two and the setback, and as a user of the trail, as we start to think about that, and it's down from this, I understand it, but still, kind of when I take the Midland, I go down this far, and it would just be nice from a consistency standpoint to kind of see how these two projects compare, if that's not too much trouble to ask you.
Well, we can take a look at it if you've been through that space where that's developing just adjacent to Union Street. My understanding, and we'll get some images of it, is that the townhomes are to face the Midland, and they're significantly closer than what we're proposing here. So the front door faces, and you've got a yard where all the, any trees that were there in that space today, I don't think are there today. But that's intentional. I'm making an observation. That's intentional, that they would have dwellings that would be constructed with front doors that face the Midland with 10 to 15 feet away from the trail, not their property, not the city's property versus theirs, but 10 or 15 feet from the pavement edge of the trail to the face of the dwelling. But we'll get that. And this project would be a different proposal. We wouldn't propose to face them because we're trying to preserve the existing trees that are there. So that would be the most distinctive difference between that proposal and this one.
Preston, we do have the Bonterra project that's just to the west of this. That would be on the Midland, and those are two-story townhomes there.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. It's a closer example.
It would be interesting to look at all those just contextually along the Midland and how this is all fitting with that. Because I agree with Cindy that we don't want walls along these different, whether it's Union Street or the trails. Westfield has more of a welcoming feel and a community feel, and so I just think that we need to be aware of it and look at those things.
Absolutely.
So I'll move on from that. I agree with all of Mr. John's comments on that, bringing the architecture around. I was also concerned on that, and you said you would address it. So the other thing that we haven't really mentioned yet are the amenities. And I feel like we're in a path right now in the community where we're seeing a lot of these plans come in, and they don't really have amenities for the residents. And I know you're on the trail, so I get that. But when I read through it, it's like we're going to do some benches, we're going to do a dog walking area. Well, that's probably that green strip down the middle is your dog walking area. It's not really something extra that you're doing for these residents. And so I would just appreciate a more, I guess, another look at it to see how you really can maybe implement some amenities for these people. And you're talking about it being a little larger, so you may have families. And so how do you balance those things with townhomes where they don't have a backyard and we may have children? And so I just want to be cognizant of that in all of these different plans. And if you guys can take another look at that, I'd appreciate it.
We will.
Thank you. This commissioner is fine with roof lines. I hesitate to try to cookie cutter anybody's architecture, but more focus on quality. So kind of a nod to the discussion about building materials and the amount of brick and the detail of design. I also can't say that I walk maybe as many trails as some of my colleagues up here, but I don't have a problem with 3 stories along a trail. I don't ever feel where I'm walking along a trail and there are 3-story townhomes, of which there are a lot of examples of that I'm walking somehow or other in a valley. That's just Jorge's opinion, though. I had another random thought a moment ago that has now escaped me. Go ahead, you have something else?
No, I was giving you a random
Oh.
thought.
Yeah, I didn't see it there, so I missed it again. Any other comments, since mine's not coming back to me right now?
Other than you have a fair amount of green space on the pipeline, I don't know what your limitations are there, but that might be something you could use depending on what you're allowed or not allowed to do.
Next to nothing.
Next to nothing, okay.
We're lucky to cross it twice at a 90-degree angle.
Yep.
And that isn't unique to this site, but that purveyor of that pipeline easement is pretty restrictive.
Okay.
I'm not complaining, I'm just
No,
stating what it is.
Right, okay.
And you might, we might get away with a non-asphalt path through there or something, but it'll be,
Yeah, that's about it, okay.
Mostly you
Space.
get to grow grass and
can't
mow
landscape
it.
in it, we can't, yeah, there's a lot of restrictions.
Okay, and the other comment that I was going to make had to do with, I can't foresee the future. We don't know what the utility is going to do. I agree with everybody here that trying to lose our great little trail there to power lines it just sounds horrible. So I couldn't even begin to think of suggestions to make on what we might do if that happens. We have to wait till we know what is happening before we can actually venture down that path, because there's just so much unknown there, and it could be maybe not as catastrophic as we're fearful it could be, or it could be worse than what we're fearful it could be and really be a horrible thing.
I don't know, Ms. Poljarek or Mr. Johns, has the city communicated council communicated any thoughts to Duke via resolution, or I know neighborhoods have, and I know the council's aware of what's going on.
We were not even notified. Luckily, we found out about it through actually residents contacting us. So we were able to get in some comments to Duke, but I don't know that our opinions have a whole lot to do with their locations.
Yeah,
But they wanted to have their meeting at Grand Park, didn't they, at the event center?
Yes, we were there.
Didn't want to tell us about it.
the one item that we did, that I heard tonight that we want to get you information on before the next meeting, meaning like well ahead of it, would be that information about the different projects. I think I can coordinate with staff, putting together an email that would have that in it, that they could forward you to, because it came up tonight. That would be well ahead of us providing information on an agenda for you to see at a following meeting. So we'll do that.
And this is a question for staff, not for you, John, but do we have any kind of overlay for the trails? Landscaping or green space or any kind of thing?
No, we currently do not.
So maybe if we've got a couple of good ones out there, we could start to piece together something.
Yeah, there's nothing particular, but they would follow the buffer standards of the zoning district adjacent on the other side of the trail. So they would provide a buffer, but not be based on the fact that it's a trail. It's based on whatever the adjoining use is.
Yeah, but since we're developing the Midland and the Monon, it might be nice to have some general standards on those that could vary with each project, but at least maybe some setbacks and some other things.
Don't disagree on that. That's something we've actually started somewhat of a draft, I don't know, or at least thinking about what that might look like, and then
Yeah.
we got.
I have no problem plagiarizing from other communities if that's helpful.
Nor do I. And the discussion about what's along a trail, so much of what grows there isn't really all that desirable oftentimes. So it just seems like, a lot of that really should go, and that we need better. But I don't honestly have a clue what's along this section of this trail. You're talking about preserving it, so I assume somebody has been out there and looked at it and made the conscious decision that this is good stuff. It's not the ratty stuff that just grew between farm fields that happen to be here, and let's leave it. So if it's great, let's do what we can to preserve it. So if there's nothing else, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We've got some feedback, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here at a future meeting.
So just for everyone's kind of information, this, I think, would be our first, if not one of our first, workshop eligible items. So at the earliest, I think it would be September, sorry, I lost the date, 19th. So with that in mind, we've kind of modified our process a little bit in receiving feedback from the Plan Commission. There was a request, I think, to get more time for the commission to get comments to us. So I think the new timeline is, if you have anything new to add from what you already stated this evening, to get that to us by next Monday. So you have pretty much a full week to do that, and then we will prepare an issue list like we normally do, submit that to the petitioner, and then we'll use that kind of as a guide in going through the workshop discussion.
Okay, so very good. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
The other public hearing item is 2208-ZOA-02 Unified Development Ordinance Amendment regarding landscape bonds. Staff report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Plan Commission. Good evening. For the record, Kevin Todd with the Community Development Department. This item this evening before you is an amendment, as you said, to the city's Unified Development Ordinance. This amendment is proposing an update to our current process regarding common area landscaping planting requirements for common areas that are located within residential subdivisions. This proposal would eliminate the current standard, actually would replace the current standard with a performance bond requirement that would be required to be submitted prior to secondary plats being approved for any given section of a development. So this proposal would essentially clean up our process when reviewing landscaping in common areas and provide the city with sureties that the required landscaping will be installed. Other neighboring jurisdictions are doing this. They have landscape bonding requirements in place, and several builders have conveyed to us their interest in the city of Westfield doing something like this as well in submitting bonds for landscaping. It's a familiar process to them. They're required to do something similar for infrastructure in Westfield already. And additionally, like I said, many of our neighboring communities are doing a similar thing for landscaping. So it's not something that we're introducing new to the development community that they're not already familiar with. Finally, this proposal will, like I said, ultimately kind of create efficiencies in our process. Our current process really involves holding up permits in a section that doesn't maybe have the landscaping installed at a certain mark, right? 50% of the lots. Once they reach that point, their landscaping's supposed to be installed, and frankly, that's just created a lot of problems with us over the years, and with the builders in terms of seasonal plantings. Like if they're building in a winter month, for example, it's hard to get plants installed in a healthy manner. Same with, extreme summer conditions. So this new process would give them a lot more time of the year to appropriately plant, and hopefully we'll have a higher success rate in the health of those plants. So with that, if the Plan Commission is satisfied with the proposal this evening, we would respectfully ask for a recommendation so we can move this back to the City Council so we can implement this new process as soon as we can.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. This does require a public hearing. Final reminder of anybody that may be attending virtually to email comments to Westfield or to planners@westfield.in.gov and type quickly. Opening the public hearing at 8:18 p.m. Do we have any interested parties to comment?
We have no one on the list yet, but if anyone would like to comment, please come up and sign in and comment at the microphone. Thank you.
We'll wait for just a little while, just in case there might be somebody emailing us. We'll close the public hearing and move on. When the time clicks over to 8:20, if there isn't a new entry in your inbox, is when I'll close the public hearing and we'll wait for commissioner comments. These are such exciting times of our meetings, aren't they? It is now 8:20 on the corner of my screen here. So if there hasn't been an email, public hearing is closed. All right, Commissioner, questions, comments for staff? Any?
One question. This does not have any effect on after the plantings are already installed, say, a year later when half of it's dead. They've already been released of their bond at that point once they've completed the work, correct?
Yeah, this would be a performance bond only. There would not be an associated maintenance bond like we see with infrastructure. The reason being, we already have maintenance requirements in our UDO for landscaping, so that would be the mechanism that we would use to ensure that anything that's dead, dying, diseased, whatever, can be replaced.
And we do actually have that in place right now?
Yep.
And does that fall on the developer then to replace common area plantings when they are dead?
Whomever the property owner is at the time of enforcement.
So if it hasn't yet been turned over to the HOA, then it still would be the developer?
Correct.
Yeah, and one other item, I believe as a part of this, we have a requirement that they submit their warranty before their bond is released. So most plants will have, I believe, a year warranty. So we are requiring a copy of that, so we at least know that the HOA has that protection for a period of time. But after that period, it would go through code enforcement and would be enforced on whoever the current property owner is.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my questions are the same I had at pre-APC, and if other communities are doing this and it's effective, I think that's great and makes it simpler for you. My questions are, how much is the performance bond? I think you said a certain percentage, because we don't want to end up having Westfield having to put in the landscaping. So there were a lot of other details that we talked about, and I don't know where those are. Are they then to be in a city ordinance or in the bond ordinance itself, or how? I don't know how that works, Kevin. Because while the idea here is, I think, probably a good one, I don't know how it works or how it's enforced or what percentage of we ask for or all those details. Are they written down somewhere, or how does that get handled?
I'm pretty sure that lies within the Board of Works, and it would be similar to all their other ones. I don't think that community development has any purview on that.
Okay, because I think when we talked about it at pre-APC, there was a certain amount you were going to require and some other things. And
Yeah, and these bonds are not through the Board of Works. Public Works is not handling these bonds. Our department will be, honestly.
Oh, so it's new. I mean.
It's a completely new bond, yes.
Well, then we do need to figure out the rest of that, then.
Yes, and it is figured out. I'm just not sure where if it's being done through a separate ordinance. That'd be a question probably for Caleb, unfortunately.
I guess to me, it's like they should be tied together, because I don't feel comfortable just saying, you can do this without knowing what the details are, even though I agree with the concept. Does that make sense?
The figure that was referenced when we had our initial discussion was that the contracted cost for the landscaping, the bond would be for 125% of that to account for anything that may not be available at the time it might actually have to be implemented, or that costs increased or whatever.
Yeah.
And that I think the likelihood that community development's gonna have to hire another staff person to do all the landscaping, because all these people are gonna bail on their bonds, is pretty low. But it is an important detail to make sure that we're not becoming
Yeah,
the
that's
landscape
correct.
team.
The landscaper or petitioner will provide an estimate. We have a list of kind of high-low prices for various plant materials, so we'll compare that estimate to that list and make sure everything's within range. And then based on that estimate, they would provide the 125% bond. So I understand the question is, where is that rule being located?
Yeah, that's my question. I mean,
yeah.
I think without that, this is empty.
Yeah, correct.
And
I
then you
understand.
have nothing to, say, you got to do this.
Yeah.
And they go, where?
Do you guys already have a system for holding bonds and things set up?
We don't. We're setting it up now. So we're working with Public Works to mimic their system.
Okay.
But yes, we
We
will
can't
have-
just give this to them?
I believe we tried.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, because this is what they deal with all the time. And then, because you have to go through the steps of releasing the bonds and all of that, so then what body does that go through? Is it just an administrative determination at that point, or does it have to go, like they do the releases through the Board of
Yeah,
Works?
I think, well, we've been advised, because this is a much simpler process, either the plants are installed or they aren't. The Public Works bonding is much more complicated, and there needs to be that kind of board in place, but I think it's statutory anyway. But this is not governed by statute in the same manner. So we've kind of been advised by the people that we've talked to that we don't necessarily need a board to ratify or verify any of this. It's an extra step really for no reason. We can keep it administrative.
So when you send your inspector out for, I don't know at what step you would do that, they're the ones that are going to sign off the checklist to say, this is ready to have the bond released.
That's right.
Yeah, it's all or none.
That's right. It's all or none.
So they would let us know when the plants are in and they're ready for their landscaping inspection. And that's when it would be done. It would be prompted by the developer.
Yeah, they'd be calling in an inspection like they do with a home inspection.
Right.
Yeah. Which is not something that we currently have in place. It's kind of much more random.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't know how important it is to have that part of it
Yeah.
in place with
That's a
this.
good question. I
don't
think
know.
we can,
Yeah, I thought this was all going to Board of Works, so this is a lot of extra to think about. I don't think we're ready to send it forward yet unless staff's ready to come up with what we need to make the rest of that happen.
The issue would only arise if somebody balked at providing a bond. If we ask for it and they say, I don't think so. That's where we probably need to have something with more teeth in it, because if they provide it, then they've spent the money for the bond. They're on the hook, they do the work, and the bond should be written such that City of Westfield, bonding company doesn't care if it's us or them or who, but the City of Westfield can then say, I'm gonna complete this. And so we take the bond and do the work, and then we release it after we have actually completed it. But if everybody puts them up willingly, this should flow pretty smoothly. And as you've indicated, I think the development community probably is quite happy to have this as an option for exactly the reasons that were described, that you don't want to go out in middle of July when we're in the midst of a drought and try to plant stuff and then end up having to call in all the plants again for warranty coverage, or if February happens to be the install date by the calendar on the ordinance, that's certainly not the time to be trying to do it either. So it puts things in a logical time frame for the best success of the landscape. So
It also gives more incentive on their part. Currently, there is some incentive with the permitting, but previously, before that was really in place or enforced, there was really no incentive for that unless there was a complaint. So they will want to get their bonds back. They're not going to want to have these bonds held over their heads, and they're definitely not going to want the city to call on the bonds because that affects their rating. So I don't see an issue with that. The percentage, I would think it would be in their best interest to buffer it a little bit. If they do strictly 100% and something happens, then they're on the hook for extra potentially. I could see us adding easily that into this sentence. We could add that the amount of the bond shall be 125% of the estimate provided at the time the bond is requested. But as for additional information, that we need to look into and come back at another meeting.
I have no idea what a landscape bond would cost, but it's not like you're needing to front the entire cost of the landscaping. It is a single-digit percentage, I'm sure, and a very low single-digit percentage of it. Probably the construction and performance bonds that I administered years ago in my professional life were usually like in the 3 to 5% range, and that depended upon the credit worthiness of whoever it was that was needing to post the thing. If you were a scumbag, bonding people would charge you more. If you had great reputation, you got them pretty inexpensively.
is the time period, if construction of the bonded section has not been completed within 12 months of the department's approval, and I assuming that's approval of the secondary plat?
No,
What is
that's
approval of
approval
what?
of the bond.
Oh, of the bond, okay. If construction of,
Basically, that gives them a year, a full
okay,
year of,
from the time they take out the bond, and they take out the bond before they get, or at the same time as they get what?
the secondary plat.
That secondary plat?
That's the, prior to the release of each section of a secondary plat. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, when do they have to post the bond? At what point in the, at the
Prior
secondary
to-
plat?
Prior to receive,
se-
yeah. Prior to release of each section of the secondary plat, right? And then they also,
Is
and then they have to
construction bonded?
install.
And but they get the bond when? When their zoning is approved, when construction
No.
starts?
No,
When the secondary plat is ready for approval, they will have to submit the bond before we will sign it and give it
Okay.
back to them.
Okay, I got it. Sorry, I've never done this
No,
stuff before.
you're
so
good.
I have stupid questions.
no, it's not. This is new to this group, so that is fine. So, I mean, there's probably still a few questions, right, that we still probably need to get some answers to, so we're certainly okay kind of tabling this for another meeting.
I just want you all to have something, some policy written
Yeah.
so that you don't end up having an argument over what does this mean or what.
I think we've got all that. I think the thought was that it would all just, it would be in our application packet. But if there's a different way that we need to kind of paper that, then
I'll leave
that's
that
the,
up to you.
that's
I
the
don't-
question, I think. Is that sufficient, or do we need to put it into more of an ordinance form? So I think we've thought through all that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, it's
not
just-
all of it is showing up in the UDO, because
Right.
it may not
If
need
it
to.
isn't completed, what you're planning on doing isn't completed yet, then we shouldn't pass something that, then you don't have the,
Yeah, if
mechanism
we need
to
it, if it needs
take-
to be in ordinance form, right?
Not to complicate matters, but what if we have situations where, say, there's a tree preservation area and they remove it, or something to that effect? How does that play into something like this?
Well, that is different than this. This is strictly for new plantings that are required to be planted in a common area. This is to ensure that new plantings are planted. That's it.
Okay, but in those instances where we're basically having them not install those new plantings because of a tree preservation area, then we essentially have no recourse with a bond, because they wouldn't have to pull one.
Yeah, if they did not need a bond if they did not need to plant in order to meet landscaping requirements because they were preserving trees, you're right, there would not be a bond. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Kinda.
Yeah.
It's going to be a rare development that has no planting requirements somewhere.
Agreed.
And in my world, years ago, the leverage that we had was, it was written into the lease, thou shalt provide one, so leasing could negotiate it out, and then there wasn't one. We are requesting sunset clauses in PUDs now. So do we request you put in that I will provide you a landscape bond? We don't really have any teeth in our request for a sunset clause, do we? I don't recall passing anything that said this is now our expectation, or did I blink and miss that?
That's a long and complicated one, Bob. Let's
Say
not
we're-
go there.
Excuse me?
Let's not go there right now,
All right.
but
And so
I get
we're-
what you're saying.
We're getting it, but, you know, this might be as simple as, put it in your PUD, you're gonna give me one. And then they're obligated to it once that's approved.
I'm going back to plagiarizing. If other communities do this, do they have a set of rules that goes along with it?
Yeah. You don't have to be smart, just. know
We
the smart
can look
people
into
copy
that.
from.
So Caleb's the one who worked on this, and he is out this week, so.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, so the comment on the agenda where it says action, forward recommendation, if satisfied. Sounds like we're not satisfied yet.
Fair
So
enough.
unless there's compelling comments somebody needs to make, we can probably close the book on this for tonight, and we'll get more info and bring it back up at whatever future meeting that more info is available at.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, so that completes the public hearing items. There is a miscellaneous item for discussion. Petition 2207-PUD-13, Woods Robinson Briggs Amendment 2. Staff report, please.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. The item before you tonight is a discussion opportunity regarding the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD amendment, specifically the proposed park and trailhead area modifications. To aid in discussion, exhibits from the public hearing held on July 5th have been included on the agenda as reference. No material changes have been initiated since the public hearing at this time. Joe Morris with the Wood family is here this evening to discuss the proposed park area modifications with the commission. He's available to answer any questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is
welcome.
Joe Morris. I'm part of the Wood Family Farms. My address is 4248 Creekside Pass, Zionsville, Indiana. I do have with me Miss Jennifer Roberts. She's our civil engineer, and she's represents Elements Engineering, and she's working on the park with us. And I'm here to answer any questions and hopefully move this public park forward. So,
Okay, that's the extent of your initial comments?
yes.
So, commission members, do we have questions or comments? Who would like to start off here?
I guess I'll just start off with, can we go over what the modifications that were asked for? I think it was wanting to remove the play equipment and things and make it a passive park? Was that the gist of it, as I recall? It's for anybody who wants to answer it. Wes,
Well,
you-
there's some confusion with us too. This park is always a public park for us, nature-focused public park. It's within the PUD, but we were always held title. It is our park. We get to say so on the amenities and the donee on who we get to give it to or who we don't give it to, or potentially the developer, but our goal is to give it to a 501(c)(3), a public entity. So with that being said, we have some private agreements with the developer, and within the PUD, there are some inconsistencies that developer knows, that we let him know. Within that private agreement, he needed to go back and fix those inconsistencies. So that's where the PUD change is coming from. But to be said, our vision, our mission has never changed. It is a public park for the public. It is a legacy for us.
Sure. I understand that.
Yeah.
It's all laudable.
Yeah.
I think for us, and you need to understand where,
Absolutely. There was no, with us, it was always open, it was always green spaces. And obviously that development, I think it's called Trails, Harvest Trails, can use this park. But in our vision and our mission, there was never going to be a playground.
Okay.
It's all open spaces, shelters, green space, places for people to
Right,
run and
right.
enjoy and have fun.
and I guess here's the disconnect, at least for me. When this PUD was presented, and I'm assuming it had permission from all the landowners to move forward, we usually get that before somebody comes in for a rezone. It was presented as a public park, but with amenities that would not only supply the general public, but would also be the green space or the open space for the development. Can we do the site plan again? And I'm just telling you what we heard, so we all know what
And
that.
we're
that-
confused also.
Right. Right,
We've never moved off our mission. It is a public park. It was within that development that those homes can obviously use that but
Right.
it is not specifically for them. It is,
Yeah, and that is not the way it was presented to us. It was presented as this is a public park, and maybe we assumed it, maybe it was said, I don't know, but there was no green space or public space or anything in the subdivision to the north, and it was kind of presented, well, here's where their green space will be. So for us, this was a part of a PUD, and a PUD is the sum of all of its parts. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That wasn't the same story that we were presented, so this entire PUD, at least for me, was presented as the sum of its parts, which gave those single-family homes a place not only for open space, but maybe a potential small playground for kids or something. So I understand where you're coming from also.
right, and if the developer wants to have that play spaces, I mean, those developers still have plenty of room to go do that, to put in those play spaces, to put in those swing sets if they like. That just wasn't our vision.
Right, you mean in another place?
In another place, yeah.
Right.
That was not our vision. And
Right.
we just are here today to answer your questions. I was on vacation during this
Sure,
last
sure.
meeting.
No, and I understand.
I was
And
unavailable.
I'm kind of on the same page with you. It was presented, at least I thought, as a space for these homes. And if that's not what you want, then somebody's got to give us something somewhere else is kind of what I'm thinking about, and
So.
to make this a whole.
Yeah, and I hear and I agree with what you're both saying. We were all in the same spot, I think. So the question maybe to staff then, what's the boundary of the conversation today? We haven't had this discussion feature a whole lot, so now if we had the other exhibit that shows the park, for example, I have no questions about that one. It looks great. But then we want to see those other amenities elsewhere. Is that this discussion, or do we need other, because that's
I
not
am
your part of
just
the
saying-
development, obviously.
I am not part of the development.
Yeah.
If you look at the total development, if you can put that up there, we originally had 92 acres of our farm. We sold 61. We still own 27 and a half. 5 of it will go to the park, and 22 is going to be a long-term lease to the developer. So that being said, we sold the 61 to the developer, and then the developer and the home builder did what, they do. We always had title to that park. That park was our decision. It is our decision on who we're going to gift it to, what it's going to look like. We do have some private agreements with some easements and roadways, and a private agreement with the developer to build it. But other than that, we have not wavered on what we're trying to do.
Right.
And it's to give back to the community.
Right. And I understand that, and I sympathize with you. To us, and Kevin, maybe you can explain, this was presented as part of a PUD with.
Yeah, I think to Andre's question, I don't know that is going to get resolved tonight. My understanding, I wasn't here at the last meeting this was discussed either. My understanding is there were some questions from the Plan Commission about the vision for the park, wanted request to hear from Mr. Morris about that vision. So really, I think we were just kind of fulfilling that request. The developer of the rest of the master developer, so to speak, for the rest of the project is not here this evening, is not necessarily represented this evening. The developer of the residential portion is on the call if there's any specific questions for them. But I don't know. I don't know how, this is new, right? I don't know how we need to work through this, but.
This is one of those situations where I think, unfortunately, they signed permission for someone to come in and write a PUD for their property. And it was written and approved in a certain way, and it wasn't what they wanted, but unfortunately, that happened.
Right.
And now the question is, basically, I'm going back to, now someone wants to modify the PUD, and so at that point, is this modification acceptable? Or is it not acceptable, and would it be acceptable if there were some other modifications made in the PUD to supplant that? That's kind of where I sit.
And
Right,
Frank,
so-
Yeah,
I
so
think
it kind of
that's a-
seems like for this evening, we can learn about your goals for the park, question and answer on that. That's great, and we appreciate that you're here for that. And we're not acting on it tonight, right? So this is for us to learn about that piece of the multiple changes that are being requested in the PUD. So that we'll have to still have the rest of that discussion later when
Yeah, we're.
developer
we're-
for the rest of it's here.
We're totally open. Whatever you guys want to answer or ask.
Well, I think what you're prepared to do, the other drawing, whichever tab that is, the one that's got Exhibit C down in the corner, yeah. That's what you want now definitively. You're
That
happy
is-
with that.
That is correct. We
So-
are, it is a 5-acre public park, nature focused. There'll be a couple shelters, a small parking lot, and hopefully a trailhead to the Monon. Kind of a passive park where the public can go in and out, rest, water fountain. There will be utilities for future bathrooms if possible, and that's one of the things that we're asking for in the change. It says enclosed or only open sheltered buildings. We need enclosed buildings. We're working with Kevin on that. All park related, whether it's a park shed for equipment or a bathroom, whoever receives this park, we want them to be able to have those amenities.
So the design that we're looking at with the additional detail that you've just provided, which we did hear about previously, that there hadn't been an expectation initially, but now there is, that there would be public facilities. You need to,
That is our goal. We only have so much money, so hopefully the first phase will have X, second
Right.
phase have Y.
it needs the stubs in the right place.
And
the plan needs to delineate future restrooms. And the language in the PUD would need to reflect the fact that this would be, use the
I
district
think
term,
we have-
this would be District 2's plan,
Okay.
and that there could be in the future, but not required initially, restrooms, and that there would be infrastructure for that. And then what we would need to continue to deal with the development team on is, okay, fine, this needs to become what is written into the PUD in an amendment, and then if there is an expectation that District 3 or District 4 has the components that we thought were gonna be in here that have to go somewhere else, find that somewhere else and bring us an amendment that brings them to us.
Potentially. Here's what I think has happened. There was the amendment before you this evening, really, with this amendment, is attempting to modify the park and trailhead requirements under 8.2 of the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD. In that ordinance, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 specific amenities, park amenities are required. Here, Wi-Fi, play spaces for children, open shelter, lighting and safety features, exercise equipment, and there's a few other things. What's being requested through this amendment is to modify that list, essentially. Now, is that sufficient to the Plan Commission and Council to still serve the park and trailhead, requirement of this development? I think that's the question. And if the answer is no, then yes, I think you're right. We need to figure out how to get to yes. Is it somewhere else in the project or what? What's the answer?
Yeah.
Right.
And this isn't the team that's gonna determine the or what. This is the team that needs to.
Correct. They're still
Incorporate.
requesting to modify 8.2 to meet this vision that Mr. Morris stated. And if there's still desire for things that are now coming out of 8.2 to still be in the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD as a whole, that's where I think probably the rest of the development team probably needs to be in the room.
Totally agree.
I personally think that's probably acceptable. you know, we don't want to take away from what you wanted, unfortunately, but what was put in the PUD supplied a need for the rest of those homes that we thought was important, or I thought was important. I don't want to speak for anybody else. So if there can be a way to modify that. The other thing I want to make sure is, have you seen the pictures that were proposed in this new amendment of what was going to be there? Because I don't want you to get into another situation where you say, I didn't know that.
And that was kind of part of my point.
We're-
Where are you
we're
as far as
inexperienced, but
finality on
learning
this
fast.
plan?
I know. That's why I'm trying to help, because I understand kind of what happened.
Yeah, if
So-
you can pull up the original ordinance, it's linked through that staff report. And it's Exhibit E, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the
Exhibit E.
PUD linked it to have these items, so.
It's about 80% of the way through, yeah.
I think you passed it.
There
There
it
it
is.
is.
Yeah, that was what was in the original PUD.
And we've seen those in our private agreement. That's why the developer had to do the PUD change, and unfortunately, I think that's why I'm here today, is also
Right.
to
'Cause that's-
clarify.
That you didn't want that,
That is not in our vision.
right?
It's a green space,
Right.
it's
No,
open.
I understand that. So my question is, the new pictures that are proposed for the amendment, have you seen those, and are those acceptable? I want to make sure we're all on the same page. when we
I'm not sure I know what you're
I
talking
don't
about.
think there are pictures.
There
I
weren't
think it's just
pictures?
a bulleted list, so
Okay.
we don't really know.
There wasn't,
I don't know, I didn't see it. I could have missed
This
it.
one?
Did you
plan
see it?
was park plan.
I think really what we're trying to, that there's just a few amenities, the Wi-Fi, we're not asking for Wi-Fi, we don't want Wi-Fi, it's a green space. We want to have
So that's it?
closed buildings,
No.
and there's some verbiage up front that the developer gets to pick the donee. Well, that's incorrect, it's, we get to pick that. And the exercise stations, yeah, we agree to that. I'm not sure what it looks like, but whether it's pull-up bars or push-up bars or
Right.
some type of exercise, passive, workout, and then head back on the trail, we totally agree with that also.
Kevin, can we make sure that they have a copy of the proposed wording and all of that? Maybe you already do for the amendment. Because I don't want to go down the line and say, okay, we approve this amendment, and then have them come back and say,
Well,
wait a minute, we didn't. If we choose to do that.
We wrote, our attorney, and we worked with Kevin and the developer, we wrote the amendment to the 8.2 it is.
Yep.
Okay,
So we've worked with the city, we've worked with the developer, and we all agree that, if we can get these changes, we can move forward.
okay,
Our questions have been answered. Now, if you guys have other questions, then
okay, I got it.
and actually, Jeannie, the way I see that is, you're here as a courtesy to us, so we appreciate that, but we have a single party that we're dealing with, which is the developer petitioner. And I don't know that we should set a precedent of putting it on staff or ABC or whoever to actually circumvent and do all the dissemination of the information, right? I mean, ultimately, this is informative, this is helpful to us, but it all comes down to what the petitioners ask. And that's where the rubber meets the road for our decisions and everything.
It's helpful to know your vision. We began to get an understanding of that last meeting. We're getting a much clearer one now, but there's still some i's to dot and t's to cross.
Sure.
We would love to be able to just say, let's go ahead and make Area 2 this, but we can't. Because
I understand.
we need to package this all up together so that the parts that are not going to be in Area 2 find a home in 3 or 4 or whatever it is that we can work out before any of this can proceed forward. But
We're all about green spaces, so that's our goal.
So I'll ask a question that is about this and is about the design that you would like to see here. When I was looking through the plan notes, and I'm not an expert in that terminology or anything, but I see an area that's talking about turf, that seems more like a manicured area versus more of a natural grasses, which looks like it's around it. Could you maybe describe narratively
Can you pull that up, Kevin?
what open space means in terms of the different, you know, what,
It means grass. Yeah, I don't,
it's mowed grass or
it's
like
mowed grass.
wild grass?
We're trying to keep, and Jennifer Roberts, our engineer, knows a little bit more, if that's okay, if she can speak.
Hi, you need my address? Sure. Jennifer Roberts, 1407 Logan Street, Noblesville, Indiana, 46060, Elements Engineering. The circled areas in the middle that are hatched are an indication of the lawn turf, the turf lawn area. The areas outside of that are to be more native grasses that would be mowed on occasion, but would be higher in stature. You know, so kind of the part in the center is more the playfield kind of an area, and the outside is more like a buffer zone of native species. Not to say that there wouldn't be mulch around the trees and some open areas there, but we've not actually finalized the design of the landscape or the park. This is just the first plan to get through this process. So there's been a lot of back and forth, as you can understand. So once we get all of these details figured out about the process, then we can go ahead and finalize the master plan for the park. But that was the intent, was to have those center areas definitely be turf. They might get a little bit larger, but in general, that's the idea. Does that make sense?
That helps. Thank you for clarifying. It's what I was reading this as, the open play area versus the surrounding area that kind of grows up a little bit. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. You had said, how many acres is this?
5 acres, just
5.
a little under 4.9. We left a little bit of a parking space just north of the park. There's going to be about 10 parking spots off James William Boulevard. And we gave that to the developer so there could be a little bit more parking north, and then the parking lot to the south. So about 10 acres.
Because it here says 3 to 5 acres. So it is.
I'm sorry, did I say 10? I'm sorry. 3, it's going to be 5 acres.
Okay, it
Sorry.
says 3 to 5, so.
Yeah, it's going to be 5 acres. Okay. I'm sorry.
While we've got a little pause, let me invite Dave Schmitz to contribute if he has any thoughts that he would like to bring up.
No, I think with the clarifications that have been made, I now kind of understand where we are with this. So no, I don't have anything additional to add. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think most of us were ready for the big discussion, not the little piece, obviously, but since you're here to talk about this, I just want to say thank you for your vision and holding on to that and the value that this brings.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of thing we want a lot of. So we're not in any way opposed to that, just trying to find where those other amenities go. But great concept and good job sticking with it.
Can I ask maybe a clarifying question from the Plan Commission? Are there specific elements, amenity elements, that you are looking for being in the larger Woods Robinson project that we can make sure that the development team understands that is still the missing piece, whatever that or those things are? Play equipment, I think, has come up before.
Yeah, go back to Exhibit E in the original ordinance and try to find
Yeah.
new homes for the things that were depicted in that exhibit.
All 1, 2, 3, 6 of these dots. What if some of them are fulfilled in this park? All 6 of these bullet points in 8.2.
Kevin, in my opinion is, and I respect what the Briggs family says here, and I understand their feelings. But I just feel like this is a bait and switch on the part of the developer. We approved a PUD with the idea that a very specific exhibits were going to be in the District 2. I mean, it says Exhibit E, Park Trail Head District 2 character exhibits. These are the character exhibits of what was substantially was supposed to be within that district. And as I understood it, the PUD, these were amenities that were going to go along with District 4, District 3, and District 4, which are several hundred homes that are being placed in the PUD. And I believe that these were the amenities to go along with those homes in Districts 3 and 4. And it seems like we're changing that now. We're losing, there are no more amenities for Districts 3 and 4. We're trying to modify the PUD to come up with a park for the city of Westfield, which is admirable. But that's not what was approved for,
Yeah,
what, 17 months ago in March
I'm not
of
defending
21.
this. I'd like to know if there are specific elements in 8.2 that you want to make sure are part of the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD. You said character exhibits, anything else? Yeah.
The bulleted items are Wi-Fi, play spaces for children's, teens, and adults, open-sided shelter, lighting and safety features, exercise stations, lawn area for recreational play such as frisbee, croquet, cornhole, etc., sculptured walking areas and crushed stone trails similar to Cool Creek connecting to the other areas of the development. That's on the following page. So to the degree that some of those 8 elements are in what you are wanting to have as far as your part of this, the ones that aren't need to find some place to exist in the other areas. And something could be duplicated, but at a minimum, each of these needs to be somewhere. So if it's in your 5 acres, great, it's checked off. If they're not in that 5 acres, they need to be somewhere.
Thank you for the clarification.
So I'm not sure there's anything else that we can really accomplish tonight. We've got a lot more clarity than we did at the start of the meeting. But something needs to be communicated to the development team on carrying your desired 5 acres forward with them packaging up the rest of these somehow or other and then bringing a different amendment back for review and approval.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we all good now? The discussion has concluded. I look forward to hopefully getting this back in the not-too-distant future and getting it all clear and done. All other items on our agenda are continued to a future meeting, which takes us to reports and comments.
You want to do the rules of procedure?
Oh, wait a minute, yeah.
No, he doesn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Who asked you anyway? You're usually very quiet. This was the time to be quiet. No, you're right. The change up front had been made long enough ago. I've had a whole meeting since then. So, yeah, rules of procedures. Let's go back and have some conversation about those.
So Pam Howard with Community Development. I'll just give a brief introduction and really summary since this item was last before you. So you did see a first draft of these changes on July 5th. Since that meeting, we have made some changes to the proposed rules of procedure. So the biggest changes are here outlined in the staff report and include updating the ex parte communication language by limiting it to pending petitions and allowing for limited exceptions when approved by the director. A second change is moving the second monthly plan commission meeting to the city services building instead of holding it in this room. Third is updating the mailed notice requirement to 2 property owners deep and removing the 660-foot option, and also adding unless otherwise reduced by the director to allow for some discretion that's used when requested by the county mapping office. And then lastly, updating the administrative dismissal dismissal section to address the concerns regarding the proposed one-year rule. As described in the staff report and in the rules, we are now proposing 3 separate dismissal timelines for items prior to a public hearing, following a public hearing, and for items that do not require a public hearing. So as I said, these are the largest changes. There were a couple other minor changes, which can be seen in the red line that were made based on some comments from the meeting. But we're happy to answer any questions or entertain any discussion at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to jump in real quick, kind of before the discussion starts. Really, there's been quite a bit of chatter about the APC member communication section over the last couple of days. I just wanted to kind of address a couple things, and then you guys can discuss. One, that this really, I don't believe this is anything new. This is a verbal policy that this Plan Commission has been operating under, codifying that policy that we've had in place, just to make it clear to everyone what that policy is. And really, frankly, discussing this topic isn't new either. It's things that have been part of trainings, both by us, legal counsel, the Purdue training covered this topic. So I don't think this is anything new. I do believe that formally adding this to your rules in a written format will increase the transparency, the predictability, and really the integrity of our process, and really having some clear limits of communication really, I think, levels the playing field for all of the participants of our process. That includes all of the Plan Commission members, that includes petitioners, that includes the public. I guess it includes staff too, but I'm not as worried about us. And frankly, I think it reduces any grounds that anybody might have for accusing any member of this body or any developer or any staff member, I suppose, of conducting business behind closed doors. So I guess I just want to reiterate, this is nothing personal here against anybody sitting in front of me tonight. I think honestly, I'd hoped that we would have had this in our rules by now. I think this is something that should have been included in our written rules many years ago when it first became a verbal policy. So there is no personal agenda or no personal attacking here. I think it's just a good rule, I think, that we need to consider locking down. Again, has nothing to do with the individuals in this room, but I think it has everything to do with keeping the procedures of this commission intact and pure as possible and as transparent as possible, regardless of who's sitting up here. So I guess I'll kind of close with that. I get, well, okay, one more thought. The workshop process that we're getting ready to embark upon here in the next month, I really also believe that that will help, I don't know, solve is maybe a strong word, but a lot of the communication or lack of communication concerns that we've been experiencing over the last couple years in our process, I truly believe that will help, again, maybe not eliminate all of it, but I think it will go a long way in making our process better and more predictable and more user-friendly, again, not just for the petitioners, but for us. So I just think we need to give it a chance. So that's it. I'll close. You guys can
And my perspective
discuss.
on implementing the workshop meeting was maybe not exclusively, maybe not even the vast majority of it, but that was a significant part, was to allow this banter in the right setting, as opposed to some of us who have been on this side of the dais long enough to have seen some things happen that got very uncomfortable and out of control because we didn't have this implemented the way it's being proposed now. And from years ago when I was first a member of this body, that was the expectation as I always understood it. I then had the opportunity for quite a while, like Cindy and Mike do, to behave with a different hat on, which allowed a little more flexibility. But I had no trouble transitioning back to the same mentality that I had originally and keeping the communications between staff, us up here now, but not one-on-one with the petitioner's team or members individually or multiple ones of them as something other than a Monday night meeting. So I think there's some good reasons for having that in here. The thing that I think is material for a revision is I'm finding it hard to believe that we're going to be able to have those meetings at city services successfully. I think this is the room probably where they ought to be, but we'll try it there and see if we need to update the meeting notices to show, second thought, we're going to do them back at City Hall where there's more room and we can all talk.
And just quickly on that topic, I think we feel like we can comfortably fit probably 20 or 25 chairs and kind of in a gallery setting, possibly more, but I think in the event that we are anticipating a larger crowd, we can always move back here. I mean, we move venues frequently when we're anticipating large crowds, so I don't think that's a problem.
When we actually had a second meeting that was a working meeting, it was at city services, and we rarely had, I don't think we ever had to move it, because a group of people would come in for one discussion topic and leave, and another one would come in. And it was actually, I think, a better place because we sat around a table looking at each other, not here and down there, so I think that's the right place to have it. I also want to make a comment. I have lots of little things in this.
Before we leave city services, refresh my memory on the audio-visual capabilities there. We'll have all the same.
Yeah, it's identical to what's here in terms of being able to project not only to folks in the room, but also virtually. We can stream live. We can record all the functions. My understanding, Chris Larson, if you're out there, correct me if I'm wrong, or Sam. But my understanding is we can do all the same technology functions that we do here there.
But
Which
how's
is
the audio?
why,
I
which is
won't be
why we
sitting
chose
next
that
to a
room.
mic 5 over there.
Well,
I've got-
there's a mic in the ceiling that picks up
Does
the whole
that
room.
have, I've never, I can recall
pretty
listening to
good.
something that was recorded in there.
You've been on the other end of meetings in that room. How is the
And usually it
audio?
winds up that somebody else actually has me on their computer or something, and that it's not going over the main system. So I'm not sure how it actually works.
Okay.
And how that would be like for a YouTube recording or something. I don't know if that would play out.
And that's more my concern
Right.
there. You had the advantage of not having to deal with what we're all more going to depend upon here, and we invested quite a bit to get this all set up and make it work. And
The
I don't want
times
to go to
I've-
a room where we may not have the similar success.
Yeah, I guess I can't say that I've been on the other side of the screen when a meeting was happening in that room with a virtual option, but I've been in that room when somebody was participating virtually, and the sound quality's fine. You can hear it. I don't feel like there's
Right, if I was sitting
I haven't had any
desk at
complaints from
home-
people on the
It's a
other end
matter of-
either. We've done
it's a matter of
pre-filing meetings
testing it out
there.
and
and-
seeing if it works.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
can talk about it all night, but it's a matter of testing and seeing.
Right, and that's the bottom line I came to, is let's go ahead and try it. I'm concerned, not just because of the stationing of people and the conversation, but making certain that we actually get everybody that might need to hear this to be able to hear it, and somebody that might want to spend, for whatever reason, some time watching this stuff would be able to also successfully watch it with similar quality to what they get here.
And I wanted to kind of go back to history. I was on the Plan Commission for 10 years and then was gone for a while and then came back. And Bob and I were on together, and we often talked. He knew retail and commercial. I didn't know that as well, so we would often discuss a petition, not about whether it was good or bad, but I would ask him questions about square footage. Is this, where do I see this? And so it was a learning experience, never an attempt to try to sway somebody else's vote. Occasionally, we did meet with petitioners. When that happened, I usually tried to ask staff to come. Certainly, I asked another APC member, and it was, again, to gather more information. I think that this workshop meeting, which is replacing our working meeting, which we were supposed to be having, will be great in achieving a lot of that. My concern is that this is written so rigidly that it may actually cause a lawsuit or cause us not to be able to talk to each other or ask a simple question. I agree with the idea behind it, so everybody hears everything, so staff is included. I'm not opposed to that at all. I know that state statute is silent on the issue. Beth has said that before. I looked into some other municipalities, and most of them do not absolutely prohibit. Carmel even encourages it. I'm not saying I'm not recommending that at all, Kevin, but
There's probably
I
half a
believe
dozen other neighboring communities that are more restrictive than
yeah,
what
and
we're
there
proposing.
are both, but
Yeah, so do I.
So here's the thing. I don't want to argue who's doing it and who isn't. Not right now. I think it is a huge barrier for a situation that apparently happened years ago. I think it's been thrown out the woodwind thing, which was basically initiated by 2 city council members. And there was staff in some of those meetings, I was told. I think Jesse went to some. But anyway, let's put that aside and not overreact to one maybe bad experience that certainly could have been handled by the APC itself, saying, hey, let's rein this in. I believe that suppressing dialogue, all dialogue, except during a public meeting or that one that Kevin approves of, which bothers me because then you get to pick and choose who can dialogue and who can't. And I know that's not what you meant or wanted to do, but the way that's written, it says we can't talk to each other unless you permit it. I think it's just too restrictive. And occasionally, I have called somebody, I called Matt Skelton once, 3 or 4 months ago, and said, Matt, I've tried to get staff, I can't get them, but I noticed in your reference in your PUD, you've referenced this section of the UDO, and that's the wrong number. I said, I know I'm not supposed to call you, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna bring that up Monday. And he said, you can call me anytime. I've asked the mayor several times if I have a question for somebody. He said, you can call him. So this is just almost, the pendulum swinging so far the other way that it concerns me. And I would suggest that maybe wording would be better. All committee members are encouraged to discuss any concerns that they have with any particular petition or application with the department or legal counsel. That's currently in our rules of procedure. I think that's a good thing. A person may not communicate with another member of the Plan Commission before the hearing with the intent to influence the member's action on a matter pending before the Plan Commission. I think that's a reasonable thing to put in. That's what other communities have done. And I think that's pretty strong. You don't call somebody to lobby him or, do that. Any discussion or for the collection of or imparting of information will be forwarded to the planning staff, which you have put in our new rules of procedure somewhere else. I have a concern with the strength of this because laws can be abused both ways. And I would rather have a little room and slap somebody's hand than to say, you can't do any of this. It means that Kristen can't meet with Justin Moffett on the downtown thing because it may involve some discussion on one of his projects.
And
That
I mean,
may be-
that's specifically why we put the director determination, that comment at the last
and
meeting.
I understand that, but
But
then it puts
there's-
Kevin in a position where he can say, this one's okay, but this one isn't, and then it puts you in a horrible position.
Yeah, I don't love that, honestly. I
Pardon
mean,
me?
that was a kind of meet halfway, I think.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know, the way it's written, I think, is an all or none, period, and I'm not sure that that's productive for our community, but I'll shut up and let
And
you.
one thing I want to go back to, when you mentioned the question from Matt Skelton about the incorrect reference, that's something that could be handled by email. And this new rule would allow for that to happen. If you had a question like that, you could email it to Matt Skelton and copy the planner and get that question answered faster without violating the rule. You just wouldn't be
And
able
I
to
didn't
call
have
him to
Matt's
do
email,
so.
so it was easier
Yeah.
just to, since I know him, and I just.
So that was a key thing for me in reading this, is it moves communication from verbal to email. If it eliminated both, I think this would be too restrictive, but I am not seeing a problem with this. In fact, I think that's an important enough distinction that my preference would be that 5B, and I think there was another one, like 8B or something later, would actually be 2 paragraphs, one dealing with the verbal and one dealing with the email, to actually make that clearer and emphasize even better what is permissible via email. Because that still gives us, I mean, email is so ubiquitous that it's not something that would be a hindrance. We all respond to the request for quorum and things like that by email. So in this day and age, we pretty much all assume that we're going to be emailing somebody at some point almost every day. It may slow things, I get that, but anybody's ever gone through a deposition or any other sort of legal process where you need to have all your documents, this is the way that's in the record. And that's why I don't have a problem with this, because we can still use the email.
I absolutely agree that I appreciate having the paper trail on that, but just discussing the ex parte communications in general, Dave and I are the only two on the BZA, and I won't speak for him, but just speaking upon my experience, I have loved being on the BZA, mainly due in part because of the ex parte communications aspect. I love transparency. I want as much transparency as possible, and so when a petitioner comes up and presents, and I'm hearing it for the very first time right then and there, that is what I want. I would like APC, whomever, to operate more like BZA, because again, that is the public hearing the information exactly when we are hearing the information. I don't want any behind the door conversations, just, you know, anything that might serve as unethical, and that's one of the reasons why we took the class, is to make sure we knew what we were and were not allowed to do. So that's something that's been favorable and easy for me being on BZA, is that I just act like that on APC anyway. So I very much appreciate these changes, and I think it's for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I might as well speak before the evening's over.
Thank you.
I do have a voice. If this is the advice we're getting from legal, and we already have an unwritten rule about it, then why not write the rule? I think that'll actually protect us more from legal action than someone finding out that there was a communication. I mean, literally, we're taking this way too far. I mean, the odds of anyone here having an ex parte communication where there's literal influence into a decision that we're going to make, I know we may have other people up here at some point with less integrity, but at least with this group, I know that that's not an issue. So it's like we're looking at all these different exceptions and, well, what about this and what about that? I think common sense applies. I think if legal says that this is what we need to do, then this is what we need to do. And I fully support this amendment.
Okay, did legal recommend this? I've never heard that, so that's new information for me. Matt's got information I don't have.
Maybe I'm misspeaking.
Because Beth has never said that, so can we expand on that?
I'm going off of what Kevin said earlier with the fact that perhaps maybe he was just referring to that they've reviewed it. And
Yes, they've reviewed this, and they have.
They've reviewed it, and yeah.
And they have mentioned the ex parte communications rule, I believe, in your Plan Commission training when Taft first started with us, as well as individually when we've had issues.
Beth has mentioned it in a meeting before as well, yeah.
She's mentioned that the state code doesn't address it. That's the legal
correct. The state
perspective.
code also doesn't address mailed notice requirements or that development plans have to be approved by the Plan Commission.
But I just want to clarify, has our legal department recommended this wording?
You'll have to ask them. I can't answer that question. They've reviewed this and approved it. Are okay
But
with
they
it.
didn't recommend it. I mean, there's just a
what's it
difference
matter?
in the, no, there's a difference because I sent a question earlier today, which is, I think, and you said it's not personal. I want us to do what's right for the community, okay? So this isn't against staff, it isn't against anyone. We're talking about communication. That's our root issue here, communication. Something at some point drove this perspective that Carmel, Noblesville, Brownsburg, Fishers, Zionsville does not have. They are not prohibiting their APC commission members from speaking to each other at any point in these rules that I saw when I pulled them up. And so I'm just wanting to get to the heart of what is the issue, because I think we can do a lot better in communication in a lot of different areas. And I'm afraid something like this is just really stopping good communication. And, you know, I mean, I have different scenarios. I have 3 different scenarios where I often text Bob before a meeting and say, hey, just this petition, I'm going to have some thoughts tonight on that. Well, I don't think I can do that anymore and give him a heads up as president of the APC. And then somebody's going to say, oh, it's okay. Well, prohibit is a very powerful word. That's not going to be okay. I'm the city council's representative. If they have a question about something I say during this meeting on a petition and they'd like to call and ask me about it, that is now prohibited. So the mayor meets with us on a quarterly basis. I've had open petitions discussed during that meeting, and it was healthy and it was a good discussion. Those need to end.
No, he's not a plan commission member.
But you say ex parte communication
No, that's a conversation.
on open petitions.
No.
Anybody, right? Nope. Where's the wording?
It's on the screen. Verbal ex parte communications with the applicant, property owner, agent, or representative for the applicant is prohibited.
He's none of those.
So it's just us. We just can't talk to each other. So council
No,
can
it's
talk.
A actually would prohibit you from discussing it.
With other commission members. So it's prohibited with other commission members and with representatives for the petition. It's not prohibited with the public or the mayor or staff, legal, another appointing body, as in council members who are not on the plan commission. We've even removed this rule that the plan commission, or the council members on the plan commission can speak with the developers, being that their role is a city councilor as well. So you could speak to Scott Fry and explain to him your concerns, because he is not a member of the plan commission.
So we can speak
No,
to the public.
I don't see where it
That's not
says
what that rule says. It says we are prohibited to discuss the petition outside of the meeting. Period.
Okay. So I guess we meant that to be between commission members, and I believe it originally stated that, and maybe when we broke it out into 2, it was meant to be, this was meant to be between members, so we can fix that.
Yeah, the original draft, I think, was clearer on that. Once we
Yeah.
started breaking it out,
Yeah, because it says nobody.
Yeah.
And if we can't talk to each other, does that mean that we can't have a pre-APC meeting? Because Bob and I have a.
well,
It's
are
no.
having a dis-
Yeah.
No,
Am
we
I not
can't.
supposed to talk to Jenny? Am I not supposed to talk to Andre?
About a pending petition,
Right.
right.
but only about a pending
Guys,
petition.
this is a safeguard. This is not meant
I
to be a
understand, but
penalty.
there are I've been doing this job a long time.
That's what got
And I know that Jenny has, and as has Bob, and I mean, since 2005. And some of that being not a counselor, and some being a counselor. And there are so many different things that can come up. And to say it's just prohibited, it's like, I just can't even fathom. And then there's these rules that apply to everyone else, but not the 2 of us.
Yeah, I agree.
And that makes me uncomfortable, right? And there's always been this additional burden, because now Mike and I have a bigger voice, if you will, and we're the ones that are meeting with the developer, and they're the ones calling us.
In that context,
So-
you're one of 7 voices, not one of 9 voices.
Right.
So
But I
you
mean,
have,
well,
Again,
that's an entirely different arena.
we're not trying to change any of the, I mean, that's a current policy. We are not trying to change it. Does it
Who
need
made the current
re-examining?
policy,
Possibly.
Kevin? Because it wasn't that way when I was on before. And first of all, it's not personal, and I don't want to talk to people. Believe me, I don't want to get in groups and talk about things, that woodwind thing. I got invited to one meeting and, you know, it was the staff said, come to the meeting, and I thought, okay, and I sat there and was quiet, and I'm sure now it's, you know, Kelleher did all this stuff, but I don't want to speak outside of a public meeting. I want to go through you. I want you to know what's going on. But I'm just concerned that the word prohibited is so strong that it can be abused by future generations if it wants to be. This is how Hitler started. You know, you can't do that now. I feel like I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to call anybody else and talk to. I'm pretty independent, and I get my own opinions whether people like them or not. But I don't really want to talk to other people or get involved in this. I'm just, again, prohibited makes it. It's a strong word. If we could do something that was a little bit, so she can meet with Justin, you know, without your permission, saying this one's okay or that one isn't, or so Bob and I can do pre-APC without being said.
But that's a discussion with staff, and that's not really so much a discussion
But
on
it's
the
you and
merits.
I. We're there and we're
I'm talking
discussing
with
things.
staff more so than I'm talking with you on those calls.
Right.
And we're really making certain that we have an agenda that will flow smoothly, that we've got everything
Right.
planned and organized, and is this really ready for the
And
light
I
of
think
day
it's
or
a
not?
good thing that we
So,
do.
I mean, that's a discussion that I
But-
don't see as really a huge conflict with this, because staff is
I-
working with us as the APC leaders. They're
But
the
I have heard
staff
you give your
leaders.
opinion on a petition at one of those meetings. And you know, I mean, it tends to happen when you're just discussing something.
That's my concern. It's the
Well, I
and
tried
but,
to avoid
and
that,
but,
and it's
and but.
probably more
Okay.
directed to staff. I forget
But
that
still,
your
I'm
ears
sitting
are on there.
I'm sitting there.
Good
you know.
point.
That's going to be the issue. Every time somebody sees me talking to Justin Moffett at a streetscape, if he's got an open petition, it's the optics. Oh, well, what are they talking about? And I don't want
I think
that.
we're looking way too
I
much
know
into this.
where
Way
my-
too much.
What? I'm sorry?
I think we're looking way too much into this.
No, we're not.
Because the optics, that is
No, it's a
so
rule that says
outside.
prohibit,
Because
and
it
that's
says
the
prohibit.
problem that
And
we're.
good.
The
You
optics
know,
are probably
I'm
there
sorry.
It's not the BZA.
I'm sorry, but for people who have been on here forever, maybe it is time for change, okay? Because I've only been involved for the past 2.5 years, and I have followed these rules to the T. So why is it that I can follow them, but no one else can? And I'm
Which
not
rules
blankly
are you
saying no one
referring
else.
to?
Our BZA rules. I said I follow the BZA rules exactly to the Planning Commission.
Right.
That's what I do. And I don't
Remember-
see why we can't do that here.
Remember the night that Birch Dalton was there or something, and you said, could I talk with you about that? And he said, sure, anytime. And you looked at Beth, and Beth said, it's discouraged, but it's not illegal. But you asked Birch if you could sit and talk about one of the issues that he brought up with him. I'm not saying that that was a good or a bad thing, but at some point, then staff should say, no, we discourage that. And that should be enough.
I mean, in the last week, we've had the pictures, horrible, what happened at Noah's property to have all those trees cut down. And Victor, I really appreciated the pictures you sent. Under these new rules, I would never see those. You would not be
Yes,
allowed to
yes, you
email.
would. That's not a current project, though. That's not a current project. So that's why I was like, oh, okay, I can send this, because it's not a current project. If it's
Alright,
something
good point.
on our agenda presently, then obviously, we shouldn't be talking about it outside of a meeting, because again, the public should have all the same knowledge that we have.
Wasn't
is my
that
biggest-
via email? Isn't that?
Yeah, it was via
acceptable?
email, so that way it
wasn't-
was a
I
paper
wasn't
trail.
On the agenda,
I have a
sorry.
question,
So
Kevin
that was,
and staff.
so, my mistake.
It says we should email, we can email each other, right? Or we email you and you copy everybody else? I don't want emails going back and forth between us.
That's the developer communication only. So if you had a question for the petitioner and you wanted it answered without having to go through us, you can email the petitioner copying us, and then they copy us on the response,
Which is
so we
what I
know the
would
answer.
do. I usually email it to you and say, can you send it to the petitioner? But what about, somebody said something about you can email another plan commission member or not? What is the status on that? What is it?
So that we've left out of this. So as written, even with this updated language where, as we said, communication between, it was intended to be reworded and this text moved to the middle of the sentence to where it makes more sense. And it just wasn't done that way. So the way this is supposed to read would be commission members are prohibited from discussing details of any active petition pending on the commission agenda with other commission members outside of a public meeting. So that is what this would say.
So if I may jump in just for a minute. For
Please.
those of you who don't me, I'm actually not Beth tonight. It is a common identity between her and I, but my name's Ashley Ulbrich. I do work for Taft in the same capacity as Beth, as of council. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any of the history regarding these, except I did have a brief conversation with Beth, and she was telling me a little bit about this issue and what she was thinking with it. And my understanding is that I hate to use the word fear, but I guess we need to be cautioned against having any open door policy violations, and that it could be construed as seen as violating the open door based on having like serial meetings without like public notice.
I get that.
So you're correct. There's nothing it's not codified under state law, but it is a best practice for this board or any board, in my opinion.
Sorry, I mean, and can't we have best practices and not have to have that in a rule?
Honestly, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, it is,
And
it
here's one of
is,
the
it is
things, I'm worried
smart.
we are gonna actually open up ourselves to litigation, because if someone comes at us and for some reason believes that we had a violation of our own rules of procedure, because somebody talked to them and they, and they weren't happy with a vote, suddenly they actually have potential action.
I mean, if it is something you want to do as a body, yes, you need to follow the rules. And it would be a violation of your rules if this is adopted. No, because they're still going to say it's an open door violation. It's state versus ordinance.
Ex parte, more than, we understand the open door laws. Thank you for reviewing that.
And I'm sorry, I am
Yeah, I know,
at a
you're being put in a
disadvantage with
bad
not knowing
spot.
the historical background here.
Thank you, yeah, thank you. Well, that's part of my, I guess, learning curve also, that I just don't know where this originated. Is it a staff origination? I mean, it's not originated with the APC. Like, where did Kevin, you called it a verbal policy.
It didn't come from council. I'm not,
Where
it
did the
didn't come from
verbal
mayors.
policy come from?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't make it. It was either the previous director or the previous plan commission.
It was
mayor.
Matt.
I don't know.
Matt.
No, it
Matt's the one that actually
predates
requests
Matt.
to talk to people now. I don't.
Yeah. I first became a member of this body in September of 2000. And we didn't have discussions like this then. We didn't have quite the same rules of procedures back then. But as part of my introduction, I don't know if it was from Brian Zager or if it was from Kevin Buckheit, who was director at the time, it made it clear that you show up at meetings and you do your job at the meeting. Right. And you don't go collaborating elsewhere. And that meant don't go to the neighborhood meetings, which weren't really a thing back then, but that kind of a thing. And I never went seeking it out. This is written down somewhere. I just thought, all right, this is my job expectations. I have no problem with doing that. I'm fine with it. And I don't look to legal counsel to make recommendations out of the blue just to say, hey, you guys maybe ought to do this. They're more to keep us on the road and not get down in the gutters and get in trouble. We have a mayor who appoints department heads to lead. And if this is what Kevin's team thinks is what we need to be doing, I'm fine with that. But I do also think that we hire skilled legal counsel to make sure that whatever it is that they are tasked with leading us to do doesn't have an unintended consequence as best as the Taft team can make sure it doesn't. So that I think we're going down a logical path that should actually bring some certainty and clarity to things. And I think while I'm through with that thought, let's interrupt and find out if Dave Schmitz is still awake and with us and wants to contribute at all, and he can contribute, or he can say, no, I'm fine. You still there, Dave?
I am.
Kudos.
Yeah. Just kind of expanding on where you were going there. I mean, and a little bit of background, I remember from back in the 90s, on the other side of the table, we had pretty frequent and open communication outside of meetings as a petitioner with members of the board. So what Jenny was saying, I remember. And then when I came back, then I learned of what I thought was a little different policy in terms of communicating, which is fine, but it was news to me. If the objective, I guess, is to tighten things up from a risk management standpoint or from a legal compliance perspective, that certainly makes sense to do. But I think I would agree with what some have said, that some of this language may be a little too absolute and create some problems going the other way.
Dave?
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave, this is Kristen, and, I have the streetscape, but I thought about you as well, because you've served a lot of years on the DWA, and I don't know if you're still serving in that capacity, which is, such a win for our community. But again, that group has, at times, open petitions in the downtown. And it's just another example I thought of. I don't know that it worries you, of this strict language and the optics of it. And so anyway.
Well, and to use that example, like with DWA stuff and more specifically Grand Junction Task Force, which reviews zoning petitions, and those may be going in front of BZA or be going before Plan Commission. If those are BZA matters, then I leave the room or sit out that meeting. If it's a Plan Commission thing, then I was told that it's okay for me to be there. And I haven't done those in the last year or so regardless, but I do like the idea of getting some clarity, because I don't like verbal rules and, or unwritten rules or whatever you want to call it. I'd rather have some clarity. Now, whether that comes as in the form of aspirational guidelines or best practice policies, and maybe something a little less hard and fast as this is prohibited and thou shalt not do this. The form that they come in, I'm not sure of. But I do think, if there was some clarity to it and something's written down, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So I think it is a good idea to get down, but I think something's driving this, whether it's a desire for risk management, legal compliance, those kinds of things, then let's work with council and come up with something that is that allows us to do our jobs effectively yet achieves those objectives. That's all
I thought
I think.
you articulated it beautifully. I guess I'd like to add, is that me echoing?
Dave, can you mute?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought his articulation was fantastic and better than anything I've said tonight. But additionally, I think this is a bigger issue than this paragraph, because I would really like to see us have a process map on communication that, okay, and Kevin, thank you tonight for saying that we have a week to get comments back. That is such a move in the right direction, and I really appreciate it. When we send those in, I would love to see a process map of, okay, and then on whatever, Tuesday, Wednesday, when staff has an opportunity, they send us a packet and say, here's what the fellow commissioners said as their follow-up comments. And we make that procedural, so we're getting the information and not having it attached to the next time that we come in, while it's still fresh in our mind and we can think about what others had to say. And so I think there's lots of other areas where the communication could get stronger. And even this issue list, we talk about this issue list, and a lot of times I don't know who's putting that together, and then things come back and it's an issue list, and I know there's things that I said that aren't on the issue list, and I never understand, and I'm okay if the petitioner says, I would like to ignore what Kristen Berkman said that night, that's fine. But they should at least acknowledge there was this question, we're not going to address it. Those type of things would make us a lot better at our jobs, and they're all part of this bigger subject of communication. And I'd love to just take what Dave just said and then add this other piece too, so where we're really tackling this whole topic.
Best practices have been referenced numerous times during this discussion. You hear those two words in lots of different areas. In work, we always had meetings and management said, we're adopting these best practices. It wasn't because they said, we think this might be some good stuff, you ought to consider it. No, it's because this is the best practice. Thou shalt now start working this way. That was the way it came across. I'm not sure how this really, at its core, is any different. We're saying the best practices, we want you to operate this way. So you write it in something else, it's still the expectation that you're going to do it.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with it. I think the way it's written is just too, that's so rigid, it can be used in a bad way. Kevin says, like, the committee that you're on with Justin, I keep bringing that up, but there are other things that we've been on together. The Ordinance Review Committee, that wasn't any official body, but 4 Plan Commission members and staff worked on it. I don't want to not be able to do that if staff chooses to do that. Maybe we need to codify that and make it I don't know. This just closes the door so hard that I'm afraid it stops creativity. And I agree with all of the reasons. I agree we shouldn't be having lots of conversations on topics that are on the agenda. I don't want to do that. I told you there was a man showed up at my front door from one of the petitions a while back, and it was like, right. And they wanted to meet, and I said, you need to talk to staff. If staff wants to have a meeting and you want me to come and it's okay, then fine. And, so I don't want to do this either. Some rules are so rigid when you make them, then you have regrets. And but anyway, I have some other things. If we want to talk about this some more, some other things in the document that I wanted to bring up. Kristen, do you want to?
No, I think I think everything's been addressed. I'm concerned about if Kevin says it's okay, because I know Kevin is probably going to say it's okay for me to continue to do the streetscape and talk to these people, and maybe Bob has something, and he's going to say, Bob, it's okay for you. And
but I don't think any of those things are violations of this rule.
But they could be.
Well,
They're talking about Justin's project, which is an active project.
No, we're not in those meetings, because I'm part of those meetings too, and Kevin is in most of those meetings with us as well. So we actually have staff as part of it in a slightly different capacity, but we're all participating to the betterment of our downtown. The reference to Union Square comes up occasionally, but any number of things that are not active projects come up. But it's in the context of, the planters and the pavers and the seating and the lighting. It's not in
I would still
specific
contend,
reference to the project, though.
If that ends up coming up, then it probably isn't appropriate to have that conversation then and there. That's what I believe.
And I see that, again, we're going back to, all of these possible situations we just talked about it with the Union Square project. That is not an active item on our agenda. So by seeing that, I just don't understand the concern, because again, it's not an active item on our agenda. It's already been through the process.
No, it's going to come
It's not
back.
finished yet.
It's not finished.
So when
It's
you
going
say
to come
active
back.
item on the agenda, do you mean actually the printed agenda or things that are still active?
Yes, that means
come back to
pending
us?
petition. So if it's a PUD, the PUD's over, and we're waiting on a primary plat, overall
Right,
DDP, none of those have appeared on an agenda. They're not active petitions. It's active petition, not active project. So petition is a docketed number. Once that number has been approved, that petition is done.
Okay, so the ODP and all that kind of stuff are not considered active if they're not?
If they're
actually-
not, if they haven't been submitted, they're not on the agenda, no, they're not active because they're not petitions yet. They're future petitions that are hypothetical at
Okay, so
any
the only
point.
things active are the ones that are actually printed on our agenda.
Yes.
But like North Point, which has been sitting there for how many years now, is still, I mean.
Yeah, that's
That's a
Right.
different, I mean, we address that differently, but yes, you're right.
I don't want to really belabor this anymore. I think Dave made a very reasonable statement, and that is basically what I'm concerned about. Not that I don't think that the idea of what we're proposing is bad, but the way it's written is not good. Kristen,
Yeah,
anything
no,
else?
no, I totally agree. I mean, I understand where everybody's heart is on it, and it's a good place. It's a good place. But this is so rigid. We are going to have issues, and
What's an alternative then? What are some alternative words we can use?
Well, I wrote something, which is just my first, stab at it,
Sure.
and that was keep the sentence that says, you're encouraged to discuss with staff. Person can't communicate before a meeting with the intention to influence. This may not be correct, but it's a stab at it if you want to look at it.
And I guess I'd really like to understand the legal concerns too, Kevin. I know you've been put on the spot tonight, so thank you for coming and thank you for sharing what you have. But when Beth comes back, I know she has also said that this is more rigid than the other communities she represents. And so I just think drilling down again on what's the risk, what's the reward, how can we word this with her would be really helpful. That's it. I won't say any more tonight. Thank you.
Can I go over some other issues?
Please.
Let's hit some other highlights, sure.
I do. On page 1, under jurisdiction and duties, you have Article 3.6. I'm assuming that's of the UDO. Is that clear enough? I looked at it and I thought, Article of what? Should it be of UDO, or is that understood? Under jurisdiction, the first line, as set forth, it doesn't say.
Yeah, it does after 12.1 though. Article 2.3, purpose and intent, jurisdiction, and defined in Article 12.1 definitions of the UDO.
Okay. On the next page, number 3, final decisions, you left out a section on that first paragraph that says that staff will find evidentiary findings with the Unified Development Ordinance and the City Code of Ordinances. You left that off. Is that because that's not appropriate for you to do? Or why is that left off? It used to say after Unified Development Ordinance, staff also had to make evidentiary findings as to Westfield city ordinances.
Let me look in the old rules real quick. Yeah, so these are items, findings I believe are only required for the primary plats and development plans.
No, but it's a sentence above where you have Westfield City Code of Ordinances and City of Westfield zoning. You have left off the Westfield City Code of Ordinances in the new one. The new one says you make evidentiary findings of fact as to their compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you
these
left-
items have no compliance with the Westfield City Code. All of our zoning rules are within the Unified Development
Okay, so
Ordinance.
that was
Yeah,
not-
that was
That
intentional.
was right to leave.
Sorry, I
Okay.
was having trouble understanding what you were asking.
Okay, I'm sorry. On page 3 at the very top, under C, it says, this is appointments to the APC, and it says 2 members of the city's legislative body who may be appointed by the city council. Should that be shall be appointed by,
I'm not sure that language has changed.
it hasn't, I think it was wrong.
Yeah,
That's what I'm asking. Should it, if we're revising this document, should we,
We would revise that if that's actually our intent. Now, my understanding through all of this is that the council has 3 appointments.
Three?
Traditionally, yeah. Kristen.
3 total
Council
appointments. 2 of them may be
Traditionally-
city council members.
Tradition,
but 2 members of the city's,
right,
so
and
maybe-
that, I assume that Kristen's appointment is covered somewhere else, but the
Yeah.
council has 3 appointments, and it's just been a practice forever that 2 of the 3 appointments were sitting council members to cross-pollinate between city council and plan commission, but it was never actually something that absolutely had to happen. Now, maybe I missed a
It is
rule somewhere along the
no.
line.
This is the 2 city council members who are appointed. It says they may be appointed by the city council.
Yeah, the city council is the appointing authority. I
Right.
think it is awkwardly worded. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
This is all under commission members.
But I think Bob's correct, though. I don't know that it has to be
Right.
Yeah,
2
the ci-
city council members,
Yeah.
but
May
they could be,
appointed.
maybe.
And they're
City
1-year
council.
terms, not
Yeah,
4.
the sentence is almost flipped. It needs.
So they could not appoint any city council members to the APC?
Correct.
they
They could
so
do 3
choose.
citizen members if they
Okay,
wished.
All right, so I guess May's all right.
Yeah.
I just assumed that that was part of the rule, they should appoint 2.
Yeah, and we can update that if that's the desire, or make it
No.
more
Longstanding
clear however
If it
you'd
means
like.
what it's supposed to mean, that's okay
Yeah.
with me.
That's really up for those guys down there to make that decision.
I was going to say, we'll have to do that. And again, city council doesn't have any rules of procedure, so.
On page 4,
perhaps you-
if you go down to 6, it used to say that the president of the APC could not serve on the BZA, and you removed that.
That rule was removed last year, I believe, when they allowed the council president to serve on the plan commission. We asked that they also remove the rule related to the BZA because it caused issues in finding BZA members in the past.
That was.
So that's no longer a city ordinance, so that's why we've removed it
Okay,
from
I
the
didn't know.
rules.
You blinked.
I believe. Okay, I'm almost done. You changed on page 6. On page 6, number 6, under officers. It used to say the director of the department will be permanently appointed as a secretary of the commission. Thank you, Kevin. In the event of a vacancy in that position of the director, the office of secretary shall be transferred to the interim director as appointed by, and it used to say the city council, and now it says mayor. So I'm not arguing with it, I'm
Yeah.
just asking why.
The mayor's the one who appoints directors and interim directors, not the city council.
Okay, so that was an error the first time, the way it was written?
It may have been a change, I'm not sure.
Yeah, or
That's-
it may have been a holdover from when we were a town. And
Okay, what said city
The-
council, so we couldn't have been a town.
well, I know, but the whole paragraph may not have been updated.
I don't
There
have
was
a
a
problem with
partial
it.
revision probably
Yeah.
that said, oh, we're not a town, let's change the city without thinking through,
That's my guess.
does
It
this
was like
really
a
belong at all?
Find and replace.
Now we're
and
thinking that
didn't
way.
Do the whole, yeah.
Again, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just going through everything that's different and wondering. On page 7, at the very bottom, committee meeting time, date, and location, this is for the plat committee. I know we had talked about this at one time, because it is a public meeting, making it at a time when people could come. And it's supposed to be at 11 o'clock. And I think we had talked about making it, if it couldn't be in the evening, when people might be able to come, because there will be public hearings, that it might be at noon, so people could come on their lunch hour, if they wanted to. Otherwise, people can't come. It's not a big point.
Our building is closed from noon to 1, so we would have to work with guest services to accommodate that, or else have someone manning the door, letting people in who come in late.
Yeah, there's other logistical problems.
It's just not a practical thing.
Okay, I was just trying to find out, because we want to include people in a public hearing.
1:30.
I think I'm almost done. Page 11. Under conflict. First paragraph is the same. Obviously, if you have a conflict of interest, financial or whatever, you can't participate. But then you added, in the event of a conflict, the member shall describe the conflict, and then the presiding officer shall record it. You added, a member of the commission or committee is disqualified and may not participate in a hearing if the member is biased or prejudiced or otherwise unable to be impartial. You added that, and I didn't know why, because it seems like it's already said, or who is the person that determines if they're, does the member say, I'm not impartial, or does somebody make that decision? I don't know what happens there.
Yeah, we'll look into when that change was made. So the original draft that we worked with was a red line written several years ago by another staff member when these were to be updated, and that update was never presented. So this rule may have been incorporated then, or it may have been something added by Beth in one of our drafts. So we'll look into that and see if it was something recommended by Beth that we accepted, or if it had been drafted by the previous staff member and we left it in.
And, you know, if it's in the first one where you shall not participate, you shall identify that you have a conflict. This one doesn't say that. It just says, it doesn't say who identifies. If
Yeah.
you say,
Yeah, and in practice, I can say that that's typically been a conversation between that commission member and the attorney. I know we've had situations
Right.
before where
and
someone's
that's
questioned
fine
that.
with me, because if I had an issue, I
Yeah.
would call Beth and talk to her about it. But this is kind of open-ended. Doesn't say,
Yeah, we could add that in.
I can envision a time several years ago where somebody talked a lot that pretty well sent signals of, I've already made up my mind, don't bother me with the meeting. So that might have been worked in around then.
anyway,
I found
I don't
that
have a problem with it.
frustrating. I wouldn't want to be the one that said, sorry, you can't participate, but
But
Yeah.
I want to know who says they can't participate, or do they say, I don't want to participate?
Okay.
Or does Beth simply ask, do you feel you are biased? And, you know, that's fine too, and then there's just an open-ended thing there.
Yeah.
Well, how do you define it, and then who enforces it? You know, it's another one of those things that can be used usefully, or?
And just real quick, in reading that, in the little discussion we've had on that one, it just brings me back to the class that we went through. And, you know, there's a whole section on biases and excusing yourself if you can't make a clear decision. And, you know, you're completely against something because of whatever factor, or for it because of whatever factor, you know. So, but I do agree to the extent, Jenny, of who is deciding that. Is it our attorney, the director? Do we decide as a whole if someone is showing their prejudice? I don't know, but I understand the intent of it. It's just.
Yeah. And I don't have a problem with the intent. I have a problem with how we administer it. I'm done, guys.
all right.
You didn't hit me. I could see you quivering over the gavel.
It was tempting, but yeah, I was able to resist. We chewed this up a lot. So obviously, I don't think we're going to approve these tonight, in all likelihood. But you have volunteered that there are some language things that got revised wrong. So we'll look forward to seeing.
Where do we go from here? Are we waiting for Beth to give her legal opinion on the best way for this to be written? Is that what we want?
To my comment earlier, we're not looking to legal to do the job of directing us. Your team is to do that, but get it reviewed so that we're inside the guardrails.
And from a timing perspective, just to go into that, we have not had any primary plats submitted since we've initiated this rule change and approved the UDO amendment, I guess, more importantly. So the plat committee is not time sensitive at this point. we did hear our first PUD item that is a workshop project that would be at the September workshop meeting, which is the second September meeting. So having these rules approved by that meeting is probably pretty important. We could, I suppose, follow the practice we have been now and calling it a discussion item or even calling it a workshop and holding it here. I don't know that we could prevent other items that are non-discussion items from coming back if that rule's not in place that says that this is for discussion items and consent only. So we may have someone looking for a vote that wants to come back at that meeting, that we wouldn't prohibit them from doing so. So hopefully Beth will be back at our next meeting and we can have some further discussion at our second August meeting. But then if we could get these approved at the first September meeting, I think that would be ideal.
Can I ask just one more thing, and I'm sorry, and I don't know if we can accommodate this. Is there a reason that we do our public hearings after our other items of business, just because they're newer business?
I think because of the longer discussion typically. Typically, the items of business should be shorter, they should be receiving a vote and then leaving, whereas the public hearing items take longer. That's not how it's been recently, but that I think is the idea.
And maybe since we will be having the workshops, things will be a lot smoother when they actually come for vote. But at least I was wondering if there was a way, if this is not working out, to have public hearings up front. Because sometimes, just like now, I mean, imagine if we had longer and somebody was sitting here waiting the whole time. You know, that's almost abusive at that point. At least it would be to me. I mean, waiting that whole time for the other items of business to get done. And I've had people ask me before, and I mean, it's a problem we have too at council because we do it at the end.
And I was going to bring that up. It's like you haven't changed that the public comment used to be at the top of the meeting, but our goal was people really need to understand what the government's doing. Let's encourage them to stick around here.
You can't force them to do it, though. I mean,
No,
and that's,
somebody can show up at 8:15 and hope that they're in time to make the comment they want to make without hearing anything else that's going on. But it seemed like a much better place. I was concerned that we were going to get all kinds of flack. We heard nothing. So
well, and I think we
have a lot of
did at
patient
one
people
point,
out there.
Bob, have it the other way where we were having items that, you know, we'd have 80 people show up and there'd be, you know, lines out the door. And you could imagine then if you just were up for approval that night and suddenly you were waiting that whole time, I mean, and so I guess it's a problem both ways, but I know I've had comments from the public about it in the past. And just because we're doing these rules, I didn't know if it warranted discussion any further.
And we could allow for discretion in moving that around. I know we do have in the rules, and this is a previous rule that hasn't been changed, that items will appear in order of docket number unless otherwise arranged by the department or president. So that would be another reason public hearing items would be last, is they would have later docket numbers than items coming back for a vote. So by ordering things by docket number, items of business that have been on the agenda prior are first and public hearing items are later. So I don't think we've ever broken up the public hearing or votes based on that. I guess except in a few minor cases before we started adding the conditions like we had tonight with the consent agenda and putting another item at the end because it's pending an item in the middle of the agenda. So if we want to add that, if we have a large item of business for discussion, the president can move the agenda during the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, change the order. I think it's just going to be hard to predict. So we've tried to do that ahead of time when we know that an item will have a lot of discussion and move it to the first item on the agenda or the first item of that agenda category anyway to accommodate that. But sometimes it's just hard to predict.
Right.
We reserve a place to call that audible, and it's shouted because it's all caps. The following agenda is subject to change at the discretion of the Westfield Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission. So when we show up, we can think, oh my gosh, let's do this one first.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I just want to make sure that's preserved, that we're not messing with that you can change it.
I think
you have the ability.
The predictability of the order makes sense, and I'm fine with that, but I like having that at the top of the published agenda so everybody understands, look, this might be different when you show up because of unknown circumstances that have popped up here, and we've got a horde that we didn't really think was going to come. They're here, so we need to make sure that we don't muck up things, and let's get this one dispensed with, so we can make that call on the fly.
Right. Thank you.
I think we're good. So, any last comments somebody really feels strongly they want to make? Dave Schmitz, this is to you as well. You're welcome to say no, because you already spoke eloquently.
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Not that I was trying to suggest an answer. All right, so we'll see this back. Now, is it okay if I do reports and comments?
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Plan Commission members, any comments for the group? Downtown update from Kristen.
We hope to choose a vendor this week to partner with us as we move forward on the State Road 32 portion. I'll let you know at the next meeting. Thank you.
Are you fully compliant with all of the surveys, or is there still a miscreant out there somewhere that didn't get it? Good, all right. City Council liaison.
Council did not have a meeting, so that's short. But a few little things. The roundabout at 161st and Union is open. Yay, everyone's excited about that.
With a wet ribbon cutting.
Not such great news on some of the other ones, so we're not going to go there now.
Guess I'll go home that way tonight.
And as of 6:30 tonight, I guess, on the website, the appraisals for Grand Park are available. Came out just now and became public. So just very briefly, it's about 85 million, I think, between the two appraisals that were done, what we're looking at for the appraisals. Just so you know.
Anything else?
Nope.
There should be no BZA report since there was no meeting there either, correct?
Correct.
Community Development Department. Is there anything left in the tank?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, our next UDO amendment will be presented at council next Monday, and then you will see it in September. This is an update to our floodplain ordinance. This is prompted by DNR. They've issued a new model floodplain ordinance and asked that we revise our ordinance to match that. So we really have pretty much no say in what it says. It's just taking their model ordinance and putting it into our UDO format. So expect to hear more about that soon.
If we want to continue participating in the flood insurance program, we need to.
That's probably a helpful thing.
Yeah. And really, you guys met Lauren already this evening, but
How come you don't let her sit with her colleagues?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, so
I wanted to congratulate her. She said John Davasewicz correctly. It probably took me 6 months to do that.
That is
so
a feat.
Okay, very nice.
I usually just long ago called him Dobo. He was fine with that.
And Lauren, all of our meetings are 3.5 hours, so, yeah, just settle in.
Sometimes they're 4.
yeah, that wasn't part of the interview process.
Yeah.
Okay, are we done?
Yep, thanks.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion from Victor McCarty. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Cindy Spoljarek. Since we haven't approved the rules changes yet we have a virtual attendee, so we still have to do it. Yeah. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spoljarek?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui? Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
We are adjourned.
At 10:13. Next meeting is in 2 weeks, and I am probably less than 50-50